The night was colder than memory, yet the air inside the monastery seemed to hum with a warmth that was almost unnatural. Candles flickered along the stone walls, casting long, trembling shadows that danced across centuries of forgotten carvings. In the center of the chamber, a single hooded figure knelt before a heavy wooden table. His hands, thin and pale, trembled slightly as they brushed away the dust that had settled over an ancient parchment. The paper was brittle, edges frayed like the wings of a moth, and it smelled faintly of smoke, ink, and something more elusive, something that whispered of forbidden knowledge. He had traveled far to reach this place, following rumors buried in obscure footnotes of long-forgotten tomes, whispers of a manuscript that the world had been told to forget. As his fingers traced the cryptic symbols inked in a language older than Rome, a shiver ran through him. The candlelight seemed to flare, then dim, as though acknowledging his touch. He dared to speak the first line aloud, a tongue that no living person should have known, and the words hung in the air like smoke, intangible yet suffocating. There was power here, raw and unfiltered, but it was dangerous. He had been warned. Those who sought this knowledge without preparation risked their minds, their bodies, even their very souls. And yet, there was an irresistible pull, a hunger for understanding that could not be quelled by fear alone. Outside, the wind whispered against the monastery's cold stone walls, carrying the faint echo of distant storms. It was the kind of night that seemed suspended between worlds, where the mundane and the mystical brushed against one another, almost touching. In the flickering shadows, the figure's imagination wandered to the countless men who had come before him. Monks, scholars, alchemists, seekers, all of them trying to pierce the veil. Some had succeeded only to vanish from history, their discoveries erased by those who feared them. Others had failed, driven mad by the glimpse of what lay beyond the ordinary. And now he was alone, balancing on that perilous edge, staring into the eyes of a secret that could change everything he thought he knew about the world. The parchment itself seemed to pulse with a rhythm of its own, a heartbeat of wisdom that predated kings and empires. Its words were not merely instructions or stories. They were a map, a guide to forces that moved unseen beneath the surface of reality. There were diagrams, symbols that seemed to shift when viewed from the corner of the eye, each one more intricate and unsettling than the last. Some depicted constellations unfamiliar to modern astronomy. Others illustrated transformations of matter and consciousness that defied logic. Every line, every curve, every flourish was deliberate, encoded with layers of meaning intended for those who could read beyond the surface. He remembered the warnings scrawled in marginal notes left by previous seekers. The flame burns those unready. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. He who knows must guard or be consumed. He shivered, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down on him. Yet the curiosity that had driven him across continents, through libraries, ruins, and whispered secrets, now surged like a tidal wave. He had sacrificed too much, traveled too far, and faced too many dangers to retreat. The manuscript promised answers, truths that had been buried for ages, truths that the powerful had sought to suppress. And as he leaned closer, he felt the faintest tremor in the air, a sensation that the very room acknowledged the awakening of something long dormant. Outside the monastery, the night seemed to hold its breath. Owls glided silently over crumbling battlements, and in the distance, a wolf howled, a sound ancient as the forests themselves. Time felt elastic. Minutes stretched and contracted, as if measured not by clocks but by the tension of discovery. Each line he read opened another layer of the puzzle, revealing a complexity that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The manuscript spoke of energies and forces that moved through the world unseen, accessible only to those who dared to align themselves with them. It spoke of fire that could illuminate the soul, of mirrors that reflected not the body but the essence, of words that, when spoken with understanding, could bend reality itself. And yet there was danger. He knew that the same knowledge that could elevate a person to heights of understanding could just as easily destroy them. There were stories of seekers who had vanished into the night, leaving only whispers behind. Stories of those who had emerged, broken and haunted, speaking in riddles of things no mortal mind should comprehend. The weight of history pressed down on him. Every ruler, every church, every empire that had tried to suppress this knowledge had done so for a reason. The manuscript was not mere superstition. It was power, and power always comes with a price. As he turned another page, he noticed a symbol that made him pause, a mark he had seen before in scattered texts from distant lands. It was a key, perhaps, to something even deeper. The idea struck him with a sudden, chilling clarity. This knowledge was not meant for the world, and yet here it was, in his hands, waiting. He felt the stirrings of both fear and exhilaration, a mixture that made his heart pound in his chest. To read further was to step into a line of history fraught with peril. To turn back was to abandon the pursuit of truth itself. And he realized, with a sense of inevitability, that the choice had already been made the moment he sought this place out. The candlelight flickered once more, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls lined with ancient texts. He could almost feel the eyes of the past upon him, those who had guarded these secrets, those who had paid the ultimate price for understanding. It was as if time itself had compressed, folding the centuries into a single, trembling moment of revelation. He took a deep breath, feeling the tension in his body ease just slightly as he whispered the next line aloud. The words hung heavy in the chamber, resonating with an energy that was difficult to describe. It was a subtle vibration, almost like the echo of a long-forgotten song, calling him forward, urging him to continue the journey, no matter the cost. Outside, the monastery seemed to fade into the night, leaving the figure alone in a space that was at once sacred and dangerous. He could feel the weight of eyes he could not see, the presence of those who had walked this path before him, guiding, warning, or perhaps judging. And in that silence, he understood a truth that the powerful had long tried to suppress. Knowledge itself is alive, a force that cannot be contained, only approached with reverence and courage. What he held in his hands was more than ink on parchment. It was a bridge to understanding, a spark of forbidden fire that, once kindled, could illuminate or consume, depending on the heart that wielded it. He leaned closer, heart racing, and realized that the manuscript demanded a commitment beyond intellect. It required the seeker to confront fear, to embrace uncertainty, to dance with shadows. And as he traced the final symbol on the page, he felt a shiver of recognition, as if the knowledge itself acknowledged him, testing his resolve. For in that moment, he knew that history had led him here for a reason. The flame of understanding, hidden and hunted for centuries, had finally found a new vessel, one that could carry it forward into a world unprepared for its power. And yet, even as awe and anticipation surged through him, a quiet question lingered, echoing through the chamber. What secret was so dangerous that empires had been willing to kill to keep it hidden? Long before kingdoms rose and fell, long before the marble pillars of civilization reached toward the sky, humanity's earliest ancestors looked up at the stars and wondered. They did not simply see points of light scattered across a vast darkness. They saw meaning, rhythm, and pattern. In the plains of Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates met in a fertile crescent, the first scribes etched symbols into clay tablets, not merely to record trade or law, but to map the hidden order of the cosmos. Each mark, each line of cuneiform, carried a sacred weight. The people of Sumer believed that the heavens themselves contained the language of the gods, a code that, if deciphered, could grant insight into life, death, and destiny itself. And it was from these earliest stirrings that the notion of hidden knowledge began to take shape, a knowledge meant for the few, guarded and revered, because it could shape not just human understanding but human power. Travel eastward, to the banks of the Nile, and the story deepens. The Egyptian priests of the Old Kingdom understood that the world was more than what the eye could perceive. Their temples were not merely places of worship. They were coded maps of the universe, their walls etched with hieroglyphs that concealed secrets of life, death, and rebirth. Pharaohs were not just rulers. They were intermediaries between the mortal and the divine. Only the initiated, those who had spent years in ritual, could understand the intricate relationships between stars, deities, and the human soul. Knowledge in Egypt was power, and power was dangerous. That is why some texts, buried in the sands of time, were meant to be invisible to all but the worthy. Even today, fragments of the Book of Thoth and other arcane writings whisper hints of a universe far stranger than we dare imagine, a universe governed by laws hidden from ordinary perception. Across the distant reaches of the Indus Valley, civilizations rose that left no monuments as grand as the pyramids, but whose wisdom was no less profound. Seals and symbols suggest an understanding of cycles, patterns, and forces that humans could manipulate with intention. Their knowledge was encoded in images, in the ritual of daily life, in the way cities were planned with uncanny geometric precision. Here, too, we see the thread that would run through history. Knowledge was sacred, and the sacred was dangerous. Those who understood could shape reality. Those who did not would remain blind, stumbling blindly through life, never aware of the hidden currents that governed their existence. The earliest priests and magi were aware of a truth that modern civilization often forgets. Knowledge is never neutral. To know the patterns of the stars, to interpret the voice of the river, to manipulate symbols of creation, is to wield influence over the world. And those who first glimpsed such power were careful, secretive, protective. These early keepers of wisdom did not write for the masses. Their teachings were often oral, passed down through ritual, chant, or ceremony, encoded in stories that appeared innocent to outsiders but carried layers of meaning for the initiated. In Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, and beyond, there existed an invisible network of knowledge, a thread connecting civilizations separated by geography but united by curiosity, reverence, and the fear of misuse. This hidden wisdom was not merely intellectual. It was spiritual, alchemical, and profoundly human. It demanded discipline, devotion, and the courage to confront mysteries that could unsettle the soul. The ancients understood that knowledge of the universe's hidden structures could grant mastery over nature itself, but mastery without virtue could bring destruction. The first alchemists of Mesopotamia experimented not only with metals and elements, but with the transformation of the self, seeking to align their consciousness with the greater rhythms of the cosmos. Egyptian mystics did not merely read the stars. They aligned their temples and temples' rituals with celestial events to harmonize the earthly with the divine. Even in the Indus Valley, the planning of urban spaces suggested a philosophy that life itself could be tuned to higher principles, as if the world were an instrument waiting to be played by those who understood its keys. Yet, with great wisdom came vulnerability. Those who possessed the knowledge were often feared by kings, envied by rivals, or misunderstood by the masses. Secret societies emerged, informal at first, composed of those who had glimpsed the sacred truths and wished to preserve them. In Mesopotamia, priests wielded influence over the city-state not merely through politics, but through esoteric insight into the patterns that governed life and death. In Egypt, the priesthood acted as both guardians and gatekeepers, controlling the access to texts, rituals, and symbols that, in the wrong hands, could destabilize kingdoms. Across civilizations, the lesson was clear. Wisdom without discretion could be lethal, both to the bearer and to society at large. It is tempting to imagine the ancients as simple, primitive people, their rituals quaint and naive. But the opposite is true. They were far more sophisticated than we often allow ourselves to acknowledge. Astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and ritual were intertwined. The boundaries between science, magic, and spirituality were porous. They were different aspects of the same pursuit, understanding the unseen forces that shape existence. To study the heavens was to study life. To study life was to study the heavens. This unity of knowledge would echo across the ages, re-emerging in the mystery schools of Greece, the Hermetic texts of Egypt rediscovered centuries later, and the secret orders that thrived in medieval Europe. And yet, despite the sophistication, the wisdom of the ancients was always under threat. Conquest, fire, flood, and decay claimed temples and scrolls alike. Texts were buried, rituals abandoned, and knowledge lost to time. The treasures that survived were often cryptic, intentionally obscure, meant to safeguard understanding against misuse. Only those who sought earnestly, who were willing to dedicate themselves entirely, could glimpse the hidden truth. It was a delicate balance. Reveal too much and the knowledge could corrupt. reveal too little and the generations risk stagnation. This tension between revelation and concealment is the heartbeat of forbidden wisdom, a pattern repeated in every era, from Mesopotamia to medieval Europe to the occult societies of the modern age. As we stand in the present, looking back across millennia, the lesson is clear. The earliest civilizations understood something that we are only beginning to rediscover. That knowledge is alive, that the world is layered with patterns waiting to be read, that consciousness itself is part of the fabric of reality. And the hidden wisdom of the ancients was not an abstract curiosity. It was a guide, a map, and a warning. To touch it is to touch the sacred and the dangerous at once, a duality that has fascinated, seduced, and terrified humans for all of history. The parchment in the hands of a solitary scholar tonight, the carvings on temple walls, the seals of forgotten cities, all are echoes of that first realization. That some knowledge is forbidden, not because it is forbidden by authority, but because the universe itself demands reverence and care when its deepest truths are approached. And so, as the wind brushes across the ruins of long-lost civilizations, as stars will silently overhead, one must ask, what did these first keepers of wisdom see? What patterns did they discern that allowed them to glimpse the workings of the cosmos? And most crucially, why were they so determined to protect these secrets from the world, even at the cost of their own lives? The answers are buried in the dust of ancient libraries, in the silence of forgotten temples, and in the few fragments of knowledge that survived centuries of destruction. Yet the pull remains, the same pull that drives scholars, mystics, and seekers to this day, to follow the trail of hidden wisdom, wherever it may lead. The fall of empires is never silent. Even as armies sweep through cities and rulers crumble to dust, the echoes of knowledge persist, faint and fragile, like whispers in a cavern. In Mesopotamia, the ziggurats that once stretched toward the heavens now lie in ruins, their sacred chambers pillaged, their clay tablets scattered and broken. The priests who once read the movements of stars and storms are gone, their voices replaced by the clamor of conquest. The civilizations that created them, Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, fade into myth, leaving only fragments of their wisdom to be pieced together by distant generations. And yet, even in ruin, there is a pulse, a memory of the hidden truths that shaped their understanding of the world. Knowledge, once sacred and guarded, now drifts through the sands of time, waiting for those daring enough to find it. In Egypt, too, the silence was deafening. The mighty temples of Karnak and Thebes, once vibrant with ceremony and song, fell into shadow as foreign rulers imposed new orders. Pharaohs were dethroned, their divine authority stripped, their tombs violated. But beneath the rubble, the symbols endured. The carvings on walls, the careful alignments of pyramids to the stars, and the hieroglyphs on papyrus scrolls carried secrets meant to survive millennia. These were not mere historical records. They were living maps of a reality hidden from ordinary perception, a blueprint for understanding life, death, and the forces that move unseen. The gods may have seemed to fall silent, but the knowledge of their presence, of their cosmic influence, was encoded in every stone, waiting for a mind capable of reading it. The same story repeats across continents. In the Indus Valley, entire cities were abandoned, their streets choked by silt and sand. Yet the remnants of their meticulous urban planning, their seals and symbols, hint at a sophisticated understanding of patterns, cycles, and energies that shaped life. Civilization after civilization rises, flourishes, and collapses. Yet the pulse of forbidden knowledge survives. It is elusive, hidden in fragments, buried beneath layers of myth and superstition, always at risk of being forgotten forever. This persistence of wisdom in the face of destruction is more than coincidence. It is a signal that the knowledge itself possesses a kind of immortality, independent of the civilizations that once wielded it. The collapse of these early civilizations is also a story of loss on a human scale. Priests, scribes, and philosophers who devoted their lives to understanding the mysteries of the universe were often executed, exiled, or erased from history. Their work, painstaking and profound, was frequently destroyed because those in power feared it. Knowledge has always been threatening, not merely because it grants insight, but because insight can challenge authority. To understand the hidden forces of the world is to wield a power that few rulers can tolerate. And so, empires burn libraries, banish philosophers, and scatter sacred texts, believing that the knowledge itself is too dangerous to survive. Yet some fragments always remain, like embers smoldering beneath ash, waiting for the spark that will reignite them. It is in this tension between preservation and destruction that the narrative of hidden knowledge becomes most compelling. Across Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley, we see a recurring pattern. Wisdom is gathered, codified, and guarded. Then catastrophe strikes, scattering or concealing it. Yet a few devoted individuals carry the torch forward. These keepers of knowledge were often solitary, working in secret, understanding that their lives depended not only on what they learned, but on their ability to hide it from those who would misuse or destroy it. They were the first custodians of what we now call the occult, the hidden knowledge of the cosmos, preserved through ritual, encryption, and secrecy. The concept of concealment was not born from fear alone. It was born from understanding. Those who possessed knowledge realized that revelation without preparation could be catastrophic. A single uninitiated person, stumbling upon a powerful truth, could misinterpret it, misuse it, or be destroyed by it. And so, knowledge was intentionally hidden, veiled in allegory, symbolism, and coded language. The stories of gods, angels, and mystical forces were not merely religious. They were vessels for information too potent to be shared openly. Each myth, each fable, carried within it layers of instruction, guiding the initiated toward deeper understanding while shielding the unprepared from danger. Yet even in its concealment, knowledge influenced the course of history. Fragmented as it was, it inspired the foundation of new religions, philosophies, and societal structures. The moral codes of law, the structures of early education, and even the rituals of daily life were shaped by echoes of this hidden wisdom. In many ways, the collapse of the old gods and the silence of ancient civilizations created the conditions for new forms of understanding. Knowledge that had once been the exclusive domain of priests and scholars seeped into culture, disguised in stories, myths, and practices that could survive in the minds of ordinary people without being destroyed. In this way, even lost civilizations continued to guide humanity, their whispers lingering in ways that would only be fully recognized centuries later. And then there is the human cost of this silence. Imagine, for a moment, the solitary priest in a sacked temple, holding the last remaining scroll in trembling hands, knowing that if it is lost, centuries of insight will vanish forever. Imagine the scholar in a foreign land, trying desperately to interpret fragments of knowledge passed down through generations, aware that a single misstep could mean not only failure, but persecution, exile, or death. These individuals carried the weight of history and the responsibility of safeguarding secrets that could alter the destiny of empires. Their courage, patience, and devotion ensured that the spark of understanding would survive, even when the world around them seemed determined to snuff it out. As we look back through time, we begin to understand that the fall of the gods, the silence of the temples, and the destruction of libraries was not the end of knowledge. It was a transformation. The wisdom of the ancients did not vanish. It went underground, hidden in plain sight, waiting for those with the eyes to see it and the courage to seek it. It passed from priest to philosopher, from alchemist to mystic, weaving a thread through history that connects us, unknowingly, to the earliest keepers of the universe's secrets. And in this thread, there is a profound lesson. Knowledge is not just power. Knowledge is responsibility. To grasp it is to accept the weight of the past and the potential of the future. Tonight, as we stand metaphorically in the ruins of these fallen civilizations, we confront both awe and unease. The silence of the gods was never total. It was a pause, a holding pattern, a challenge to humanity to rise to the occasion. And somewhere, in the fragments that survived, in the whispers that were carried across deserts and oceans, there is a message that the pursuit of forbidden knowledge is not just an intellectual endeavor, but a spiritual journey. It is a path fraught with danger, illuminated by insight, and demanding of courage. The question that lingers, echoing through the ruins and across centuries, is one that every seeker must confront. What is so powerful, so transformative, that civilizations feared it enough to attempt to erase it completely? And more urgently, are we ready to understand it? Long after the ruins of fallen cities had settled into silence, a new kind of seeker emerged. Across the deserts of Persia, under skies that shimmered with constellations unfamiliar to the West, the Magi walked in purposeful solitude. They were neither soldiers nor kings, yet their influence reached far beyond the deserts and valleys in which they roamed. Cloaked in simple robes, they carried not swords or wealth, but knowledge of the stars, the elements, and the hidden patterns that governed life itself. These men were priests, philosophers, and astrologers, their lives devoted to understanding forces invisible to ordinary sight. To them, fire was not merely warmth. It was a symbol, a vessel, and a tool. The sacred flame represented divine insight, a bridge between the mortal and the eternal. The Magi understood that the universe was structured by patterns, cycles of light and darkness, birth and death, harmony and chaos. Each star in the night sky, each shifting season, each subtle vibration of the earth carried meaning. They could read the heavens as one might read a living text, interpreting movements as messages from higher intelligences. To observe a comet's path was to glimpse destiny. To trace the lines of a shadow was to measure the flow of unseen energies. These were not the fantasies of superstition, but disciplined study rooted in centuries of observation and ritual. Theirs was a science of the soul as much as of the cosmos, a blend of mathematics, meditation, and intuition that made the ordinary world feel alive with secret currents. Their rituals were precise, exacting, and demanding. The Magi would gather around fires that danced in the desert wind, chanting invocations in tongues older than recorded history. They drew circles in the sand, inscribed with symbols that might seem abstract to an untrained eye, but which were maps of cosmic forces. They worked to align themselves with the flow of the universe, believing that understanding these hidden patterns could grant insight into fate itself. Some of their practices seem strange or arcane to modern sensibilities, but in their time, they were profound exercises of perception and power. Fire, wind, water, and earth were not mere elements. They were manifestations of universal law, and mastery over them required discipline, reverence, and the courage to confront truths that could unsettle the mind. It was in these practices that the Magi became more than observers. They became intermediaries, bridging the gap between humanity and forces larger than themselves. Their influence stretched into the courts of kings and the hearts of ordinary people. Emperors sought their counsel not merely for practical guidance, but because they understood, even if only vaguely, that the Magi could glimpse things unseen, that they could perceive the flow of events before they unfolded. This power, subtle yet undeniable, gave them status and influence, and yet it was also dangerous. Knowledge, once recognized as potent, invited envy, suspicion, and sometimes violence. The Magi themselves understood that their lives were often at risk. The very fire they wielded could consume those unprepared to handle it. Beyond Persia, echoes of their teachings rippled through Babylon and beyond. Babylonian astrologers, whose knowledge of planetary motion was unparalleled, traced similar principles in their cuneiform records. They charted eclipses, phases of the moon, and alignments of planets, interpreting them as messages from the divine. Their work was meticulous, painstaking, and for centuries, accessible only to those initiated into the mystery. They understood a profound truth. The world was alive with forces that could not be seen by the casual eye. Only through rigorous study and devotion could one begin to comprehend the hidden order, and only with this comprehension could one hope to influence it. The Magi's teachings also touched the metaphysical, exploring the relationship between the human soul and the cosmos. They proposed that the mind, properly disciplined, could access hidden realms of reality, communicate with forces unseen, and even influence events in the material world. It was a philosophy of connection. Humans were not merely passive observers of the universe, but participants in a larger dance of energy and consciousness. This principle, that understanding the hidden patterns of existence granted the ability to act within them, would become a cornerstone of occult traditions for centuries to come. What the Magi glimpsed in the stars, the the Hermetic philosophers would later codify in writing. What they practiced in desert solitude, Renaissance scholars would seek in illuminated manuscripts. Yet, for all their wisdom, the Magi faced threats both external and internal. Foreign invaders, religious zealots, and even rival priesthoods sought to suppress their teachings, fearing that knowledge could challenge authority. Within their own ranks, jealousy and ambition occasionally threatened to fracture the unity of their study. The knowledge they held was powerful precisely because it was rare, and rarity breeds both reverence and peril. To misinterpret a symbol, to misuse a ritual, or to overreach in ambition could have catastrophic consequences. For this reason, the Magi developed intricate systems of secrecy. Knowledge was transmitted carefully, often orally, through ritual, and by symbolic demonstration. A single error in interpretation could lead not only to personal ruin, but to the collapse of the delicate web of understanding that had taken generations to construct. Despite these dangers, the legacy of the Magi endured. Their ideas traveled along trade routes, across deserts, and over mountains, seeding the foundations of mystical and scientific thought in other civilizations. Their synthesis of observation, ritual, and philosophy became the blueprint for subsequent schools of wisdom, from Greek mystery cults to Egyptian Hermeticism. Their insistence on disciplined practice, ethical engagement, and the careful stewardship of knowledge echoed through the ages. What began as solitary observation of stars and flame would eventually blossom into complex systems of thought, ritual, and secret societies that shaped history in subtle but profound ways. Even now, as we look back across millennia, the image of the Magi remains compelling. Solitary figures in desert night, eyes fixed on the heavens, hands tracing symbols of power in the sand, their minds reaching beyond the visible into the hidden. They understood that knowledge was not merely information, but a force, a fire that could illuminate, transform, or destroy. Their courage, patience, and insight ensured that the spark of ancient wisdom would survive the fall of empires, the rise of new religions, and the relentless march of time. And in that survival lies a profound lesson for all seekers of truth, that knowledge is never neutral, that the pursuit of understanding demands reverence, and that those who seek the hidden must walk the path with both courage and humility. As the first light of dawn brushed the desert sands, the Magi would gather their scrolls and instruments, extinguish their fires, and retreat into the quiet of the world, leaving behind only whispers of what had been learned. But those whispers would endure. They would travel across continents, inspire philosophers, mystics, and scholars, and eventually merge with other currents of hidden knowledge to form the undercurrent of esoteric tradition that flows even to this day. And somewhere, in the rhythm of the stars, in the flicker of a candle, in the patterns of life that we can barely perceive, the legacy of the Magi continues. A reminder that some truths, though hidden, are eternal, waiting for the courageous to rediscover them. In the sun-drenched hills of ancient Greece, a new kind of seeker emerged, one who did not merely observe the heavens or worship the fire of distant deserts, but sought to understand the very principles that governed the world. These were the philosophers, men and women who wandered through marketplaces, temples, and sacred groves, questioning everything, listening for answers hidden beneath the surface of reality. To the uninitiated, they were scholars, teachers, thinkers, but to those who glimpsed the deeper currents of their work, they were custodians of secrets, keepers of knowledge that had been passed down from civilizations long vanished, encoded into myths, rituals, and teachings that appeared simple but concealed profound truths. Pythagoras, whose name is now synonymous with mathematics, understood that numbers were more than mere symbols for counting. To him, they were the language of the cosmos itself, a hidden code that explained harmony, proportion, and even the motions of the stars. He traveled from Egypt and Babylon, absorbing the esoteric teachings of the priests and scribes, learning how geometry and music could reflect the structure of reality. In his school, students did not merely study arithmetic. They studied the universe, learning to see patterns in the world that ordinary eyes could not detect. Numbers, ratios, and harmonies became tools for understanding not only the material world, but the unseen forces that shaped life, destiny, and the soul. Beyond Pythagoras, the mystery schools of Eleusis offered initiates a different, yet complementary, path. Here, under the shadow of ancient temples, followers participated in rituals designed to awaken perception, to allow glimpses of realms beyond ordinary consciousness. These ceremonies were carefully guarded, their meaning conveyed through symbolism, allegory, and experiential insight rather than simple instruction. Initiates were taught that life was more than it appeared, that beneath the mundane, hidden forces shaped reality, and that understanding these forces required both discipline and courage. The rites were transformative, not for entertainment or status, but to prepare the mind and soul to perceive truths that, if revealed prematurely, could overwhelm or destroy. Plato, inspired by the Egyptians and the mystery schools he observed, codified these hidden truths in dialogues that would survive the fall of Athens and the decay of empires. His writings, layered with allegory, parable, and philosophical argument, were more than abstract thought. They were manuals for perceiving a reality that most people could not even imagine. The allegory of the cave, for instance, was not merely a story about shadows and prisoners, but a coded lesson about perception, reality, and enlightenment. It taught that the world we see is only a reflection, that deeper truths lie beyond immediate appearances, and that the path to understanding requires discipline, insight, and courage to face what is unfamiliar and often unsettling. The intersection of mathematics, ritual, and philosophy created a framework that was both practical and mystical. The philosophers of Greece understood something that the world often forgets: that knowledge and wisdom are inseparable, that the pursuit of truth is both an intellectual and a spiritual journey. Geometry, astronomy, and logic were not mere academic exercises. They were tools for transformation, keys to unlocking the hidden patterns that governed nature and consciousness. In this sense, the Greeks became the bridge between the mystical traditions of the ancients and the intellectual rigor of Western thought. They codified secrets, distilled practices, and transmitted wisdom that had survived the destruction of empires, carrying forward a lineage of hidden knowledge that would eventually converge with Hermeticism, alchemy, and the occult traditions of later centuries. But knowledge alone was not enough. The philosophers understood that insight into the hidden structures of the universe demanded moral and ethical development. To perceive truth was to assume responsibility, and to act without understanding could be catastrophic. The Greeks recognized that power over hidden forces was inherently dangerous, and that wisdom required restraint, discipline, and humility. Their teachings were designed not to empower the ego, but to cultivate awareness, discernment, and harmony with the cosmos. In this way, philosophy became not only a method of inquiry but a form of initiation, a pathway for transforming the mind, the soul, and ultimately one's relationship to the universe. The influence of these thinkers extended far beyond their lifetimes. Though the political structures of Greece fell to conquest, and empires rose and collapsed in the centuries that followed, the philosophical insights persisted. Their ideas were carried into Alexandria, where scholars preserved and expanded upon the works of Plato, Pythagoras, and others, blending them with Egyptian, Babylonian, and Persian wisdom. This fusion of traditions became the foundation of Hermeticism, a mystical framework that sought to unify knowledge of the stars, the elements, and the human soul into a coherent system. Hermeticism, in turn, would influence alchemists, mystics, and secret societies for centuries, ensuring that the spark of ancient wisdom survived the ravages of history. The Greeks also emphasized the importance of experiential learning, of directly engaging with knowledge rather than merely reading or hearing about it. Their schools, temples, and mystery rites were spaces where students confronted the limitations of ordinary perception, experimented with the mind, and explored the boundaries of consciousness. This experiential dimension was crucial because hidden knowledge is not simply intellectual. It is transformative. It reshapes perception, alters understanding, and changes the way one interacts with the world. The philosophers understood that without personal engagement, knowledge remained inert, like a flame without air, incapable of igniting insight or understanding. In reflecting on the legacy of these thinkers, one realizes that their greatest contribution was not the answers they provided, but the methods they cultivated, the discipline of inquiry, the courage to seek beyond appearances, and the recognition that the universe is governed by hidden, intelligible patterns. They understood that the pursuit of truth is a lifelong journey, fraught with uncertainty, risk, and revelation. Their teachings were a call to awaken perception, to seek what lies beyond ordinary understanding, and to honor the responsibility that comes with knowledge. As we trace the lineage of hidden wisdom from the deserts of Persia to the hills of Greece, a clear pattern emerges. Knowledge is never static. It moves, evolves, and is carefully transmitted, often in secret, through generations of seekers who understand that what is revealed too quickly can destroy as easily as it enlightens. The philosophers of Greece were among the first to codify, systematize, and expand upon these ancient insights, blending observation, mathematics, ritual, and moral responsibility into a framework that would shape the course of human thought for centuries. And though their temples have long since fallen, their legacy endures, a testament to the power of disciplined, courageous inquiry and the eternal human desire to grasp what lies beyond the visible. In the deserts of Egypt, where the sands shift with an almost deliberate patience and the wind carries whispers of ancient empires, a figure emerges from the mists of time, neither fully historical nor entirely myth. He is Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great, a name that evokes mastery over thought, word, and deed, over heaven, earth, and the soul. To the untrained eye, he might seem like a legend, a shadow stitched from the stories of priests and philosophers. Yet his teachings, captured in the Hermetica, bear a weight that has resonated through millennia. They speak not only of philosophy, but of transformation, of hidden powers, and of a reality that transcends the ordinary. To encounter Hermes is to glimpse a lineage of wisdom that stretches from the earliest magi of Persia to the philosophers of Greece, uniting their insights into a single, coherent vision of the universe. Hermes understood that the visible world is only a fraction of existence. He described a reality layered like an onion, with dimensions of energy, consciousness, and intention underlying the material. To the uninitiated, his words might seem cryptic, almost paradoxical, as above, so below, as within, so without. But these are not merely aphorisms. They are keys, guiding the mind to perceive the unity of all things. Every star, every stone, every breath carries significance. Every action, every thought resonates with the cosmic order. And the one who grasps these principles can align themselves with the forces that shape the universe, moving with understanding rather than blind reaction. The Hermetica was not a single text but a body of writings, dialogues, and treatises, each exploring different aspects of existence. Some passages describe the creation of the cosmos, the nature of God, and the structure of reality. Others reveal methods for the transformation of the self, techniques to purify the mind and body, and guidance for those who would seek hidden knowledge. These texts were revolutionary because they did not separate science, spirituality, and philosophy. To the Hermetic thinker, understanding the stars was inseparable from understanding the soul. Knowledge of the elements was inseparable from knowledge of consciousness. In every line, there is a sense of wholeness, a vision of reality as interconnected and alive. Hermes' teachings traveled quietly through time, carried by scribes, mystics, and scholars who recognized their potency. In Alexandria, a city that would become the intellectual heartbeat of the ancient world, Hermetic texts were studied alongside Greek philosophy, mathematics, and medicine. The blend of Egyptian mysticism and Hellenistic thought created a powerful synthesis. Hermetic principles informed alchemy, astrology, and early science, providing a philosophical and ethical framework for those who dared to experiment with both matter and mind. The Hermetica was not just abstract theory. It was a practical guide, intended to awaken perception, cultivate discipline, and guide the soul toward illumination. The core of Hermes' philosophy is the concept of transformation. Just as lead could be turned into gold in the alchemical imagination, the human soul could be purified and elevated through knowledge, discipline, and understanding. This was not metaphor alone. It was a profound recognition that the self is a microcosm of the universe. By aligning thought, intention, and action with the hidden structures of reality, a person could harmonize with the divine, transcending the limitations of ordinary perception. In this sense, Hermeticism is not merely mystical speculation. It is a manual for living, a method for becoming conscious of the subtle forces that shape both inner and outer worlds. Yet this knowledge was not easily attained. Hermes was explicit in his warnings. The truths he revealed were powerful and dangerous. To engage with them superficially was to invite confusion, illusion, and potentially disaster. Initiates had to cultivate patience, discernment, and courage. They were instructed to meditate upon the principles, to observe the natural world carefully, and to practice moral integrity. Knowledge was never neutral. It was a force, a tool, and a responsibility. And those who failed to respect its power risked being overwhelmed, lost in illusions of control or ego, blind to the subtle currents that they thought they commanded. Hermes also emphasized secrecy. The Hermetica were written in ways that concealed as much as they revealed. Symbols, allegories, and metaphors served both as guides for the prepared and as barriers for the unready. The wisdom was alive. It tested the seeker, revealing its depths only to those capable of understanding. Throughout history, these texts were carefully guarded, copied, and transmitted by those who recognized their significance. To possess Hermetic knowledge was to join a lineage of seekers stretching back to the earliest civilizations, each custodian aware that revelation must be balanced with caution, and that power without understanding is perilous. The impact of Hermes' teachings can be seen across centuries. Renaissance thinkers, alchemists, and even scientists looked to Hermetic principles for guidance. The Hermetica provided a bridge between the mystical traditions of antiquity and the intellectual developments of later eras. Its insistence on observation, reflection, and ethical engagement influenced not only occult traditions but also the emerging frameworks of empirical investigation, suggesting that the pursuit of hidden knowledge and the pursuit of truth are intertwined. Even in the modern era, echoes of Hermetic thought can be found in psychology, quantum theory, and the philosophy of consciousness, a testament to the enduring power of insights that were once considered dangerous and forbidden. What is striking about Hermes, and why he remains such a pivotal figure in the history of hidden knowledge, is his insistence on unity. He did not separate God, nature, or the human mind into isolated domains. Everything is connected, and understanding any part requires understanding the whole. This holistic vision is radical in its simplicity. The cosmos is a living system, consciousness is a force, and humanity has the capacity to perceive and align with the underlying order. For those who grasp it, this is transformative not merely intellectually but existentially. The Hermetica calls on the seeker to awaken, to recognize the divine spark within, and to navigate life with both insight and reverence. As the sun sets over the pyramids and the desert wind carries the scent of history and dust, one can almost imagine Hermes walking among the temples and tombs, speaking quietly to those who are ready to listen. His teachings are not relics of a distant past. They are living instructions, waiting for anyone courageous enough to seek them. And in this waiting, in this delicate transmission across centuries, lies a profound lesson. Knowledge is alive, hidden, and transformative. To engage with it is to step into a lineage that stretches from the earliest magi to the philosophers of Greece and beyond, a lineage that reminds us that understanding the universe begins with understanding ourselves, and that the greatest secrets are those that awaken consciousness and illuminate the soul. As the Roman Empire stretched its shadow across the Mediterranean, the world of hidden knowledge faced a new and relentless threat. The scrolls that had survived centuries of desert winds, temple fires, and conquest were now at risk of annihilation, not by accident, but by design. Empires feared the power of understanding, not simply the mundane authority of kings, but the invisible influence of knowledge that could challenge belief, power, and control. The Hermetic texts, the alchemical treatises, the teachings of the Magi and Greek philosophers, all became targets. Within the grand libraries of Alexandria, once the beating heart of learning, scholars watched in despair as invaders, indifferent or hostile, reduced centuries of accumulated wisdom to ash and dust. It was not merely fire consuming papyrus and parchment. It was an attempt to erase human memory itself. Yet the threat was not only from armies or conquerors. As Christianity spread across the Roman world, the Church sought to impose a singular vision of truth, one that left little room for the nuanced, often mystical insights of Hermetic and pagan traditions. knowledge that revealed hidden forces, that encouraged personal exploration of the divine, or that suggested humanity could align with cosmic order outside of orthodox doctrine was dangerous. To the authorities, such texts were heretical, subversive, and threatening. Priests, monks, and enforcers scoured libraries, collecting scrolls for destruction or concealment. Some texts were burned in public, intended as both punishment and warning. Others were hidden, buried beneath stones or in secret compartments, entrusted to a few faithful keepers who understood that survival required cunning, discretion, and sometimes sacrifice. The imagery of fire becomes symbolic here, carrying a dual meaning. It is both destructive and transformative. For those who wielded knowledge carefully, fire illuminated the path, symbolizing enlightenment, purification, and insight. But when wielded by fear, by authority seeking control, it became a tool of obliteration. The contrast is striking. Civilizations had long revered fire as sacred, the element of divine insight, and now it was used to suppress that very insight. The tension between illumination and destruction defines the struggle of forbidden knowledge throughout history, a tension that would echo in every era where power and truth collide. In these turbulent centuries, secrecy became survival. Hermetic and occult texts were copied, translated, and concealed with care, often under layers of allegory or encryption. Symbols that once conveyed profound insight to the initiated became a shield against inquisitors and zealots. Hidden meanings were woven into metaphors and myths, so that only those trained to perceive the subtlety could access the deeper truths. The knowledge persisted, but always as a flickering flame, precarious and vulnerable. Those who held it were both guardians and adventurers, aware that a single misstep could mean annihilation of the text, or worse, of themselves. The destruction of knowledge also had a human toll. Scholars, scribes, and initiates often paid the ultimate price for their dedication. Some were executed for possessing forbidden texts, others were exiled, and many disappeared into history, leaving behind only traces of their work. Their courage, however, ensured that fragments of Hermetic wisdom survived. A single scroll hidden in a monastery, a cipher preserved in a scholar's annotations, or a manuscript buried beneath the ruins of a forgotten city could contain insights that bridged centuries. These remnants became lifelines for future generations of seekers, a testament to the enduring power of knowledge, even in the face of systematic erasure. The intensity of this struggle also reveals an important truth. Knowledge is not only dangerous because it empowers individuals, but because it democratizes insight. Empires and religious authorities feared that if too many people gained access to the truths contained within the Hermetica or other mystical texts, the established order would be destabilized. To understand the hidden forces of the universe, to perceive the patterns that govern life and destiny, is to possess a subtle power that cannot be legislated or controlled through force alone. This fear drives the recurring attempt to suppress wisdom, a theme repeated across continents and centuries. Despite the destruction, the persistence of Hermetic knowledge is remarkable. Monks in remote monasteries, often risking lives and livelihoods, copied texts in secret. Marginal notes, coded illustrations, and allegorical interpretations ensured that the essential truths were transmitted, even when the literal words could not be spoken openly. In some cases, entire texts were smuggled to distant lands, reaching scholars in Italy, Spain, and the emerging centers of learning that would later fuel the Renaissance. What was intended to die often found a way to survive, like water seeping through cracks in stone, persistent and unstoppable. This survival also transformed the meaning of the texts. Hidden, encrypted, and allegorical, the writings became more than repositories of knowledge. They became initiatory experiences. The seeker was forced to engage deeply, to interpret, to reflect, and to internalize. A Hermetic manuscript was not just a manual. It was a mirror, challenging the reader to confront the unknown, to wrestle with complexity, and to demonstrate patience and discernment. In this way, persecution inadvertently strengthened the tradition, forging a lineage of dedicated seekers capable of navigating the dangerous interplay of revelation and concealment. The scrolls that were burned, hidden, or smuggled also shaped the evolution of later mystical traditions. Alchemists, astrologers, and magicians of the medieval period drew upon these remnants, weaving Hermetic principles into new systems of practice. Christian mystics, sometimes covertly, incorporated insights into meditative and contemplative disciplines. Even early scientists, unknowingly guided by Hermetic influence, explored nature as a structured, intelligible system, seeking patterns, relationships, and hidden laws. What had been targeted for destruction became, paradoxically, the seedbed for centuries of human exploration, intellectual development, and spiritual inquiry. By the end of the early medieval period, the surviving Hermetic texts had been transformed from open instruction to coded inheritance. They existed as sparks of light in a long, darkened landscape, accessible only to those willing to seek with determination and insight. These were not just words on parchment. They were living vessels of wisdom, carrying centuries of knowledge, observation, and spiritual insight. And the lesson remains stark. The history of forbidden knowledge is inseparable from the history of power, fear, and human courage. The scrolls they tried to burn remind us that understanding is never free from risk, that insight carries responsibility, and that the pursuit of truth often demands sacrifice. And so, as the embers of lost scrolls smolder in memory, we are left with a profound question that echoes through the corridors of history. What is so powerful, so transformative, that empires and religious authorities have feared it enough to destroy it? What truths lay hidden within the Hermetica, the alchemical manuscripts, and the mystical treatises that survived only through courage and secrecy? The answer is not simple, nor is it fully knowable. But it is here, in the delicate threads of surviving texts and in the lineage of those who preserved them, that the story of human curiosity, daring, and the relentless search for forbidden knowledge continues. In the shadowed chambers of medieval Europe, the spark of ancient wisdom ignited in new and transformative ways. Hermetic principles, once whispered in the deserts of Egypt and encoded in the scrolls that had survived attempted erasure, now found life in the laboratories of alchemists. These were men and women who understood that the world was not merely matter, but a complex interplay of forces, a living system in which subtle patterns of energy and intention shaped reality. To the uninitiated, they appeared to be dreamers, tinkering with metals and minerals, obsessed with gold and the elusive philosopher's stone. But to those who understood, their work was a continuation of a sacred lineage, the practical application of knowledge that had once been hidden in the deserts, temples, and mystery schools of antiquity. Alchemy was not merely a proto-science. It was a spiritual and philosophical pursuit. Every crucible, furnace, and vial was a mirror of the cosmos, reflecting the relationship between the macrocosm and the microcosm. The transformation of base metals into gold was symbolic as much as it was experimental, representing the potential for human consciousness to transmute itself, to ascend from ignorance to illumination. The alchemists understood that the physical world and the spiritual world were intertwined, that matter could teach, that experimentation was a pathway not only to material understanding but to self-knowledge. In this way, the laboratory became both a physical and a sacred space, a temple where the invisible laws of the universe could be studied, tested, and experienced. The teachings of Hermes Trismegistus and the Hermetica were foundational to this alchemical vision. Concepts like as above, so below guided the alchemists' understanding of the relationship between the universe and the self. The stars were not distant lights, but symbols of higher truths, their positions and movements reflecting the dynamics of human experience. Elements were not inert substances, but manifestations of universal forces, each with its own character and spiritual significance. The philosopher's stone was more than a metallurgical goal. It was an allegory for the ultimate achievement of harmony, insight, and integration. In essence, the alchemist was a magician, a scientist, and a mystic all at once, a custodian of knowledge that had been carefully preserved across millennia. Yet this pursuit was perilous. Alchemists worked in secrecy, aware that their knowledge was both powerful and dangerous. They faced persecution from religious authorities who misunderstood their intentions, from political powers wary of the subversive implications of their work, and from peers whose ambition could lead to betrayal. Their manuscripts were often coded, written in symbols, allegories, and riddles, ensuring that only those with sufficient insight could decipher them. Each experiment was not merely a test of physical skill, but a test of perception, patience, and moral integrity. To approach the fire unprepared was to invite disaster, for the forces being harnessed were subtle, potent, and not entirely under human control. The metaphor of fire becomes central in this tradition, carrying a dual significance reminiscent of the Magi of Persia. Fire was both destructive and purifying. In the crucible, it transformed metals, but it also transformed the practitioner. The heat of the furnace was mirrored in the heat of discipline, focus, and meditation. The alchemist was forced to confront the volatility of both matter and mind, to refine not only substances but also character. In this way, every success, every failure was a lesson, an initiation, a step along the path of illumination. To master the alchemist's fire was to master both the world and oneself, and only those capable of humility, patience, and insight could hope to succeed. Alchemy also became a bridge between cultures and centuries. Knowledge that had traveled from Egypt through Greece and the Hermetic tradition now mingled with European scholarship, Arabian science, and mystical practices. Translations of Arabic and Greek texts into Latin during the 12th and 13th centuries brought this wisdom to the universities and courts of Europe. Alchemists became both scholars and adventurers, traveling across kingdoms, exchanging ideas, and slowly transforming what had once been hidden into a tradition that, though still secretive, was increasingly influential. They preserved ancient knowledge while expanding it, integrating mathematics, astronomy, and medicine into a coherent practice aimed at understanding the cosmos and humanity's place within it. This era also marks the beginning of the profound tension between alchemy and authority. While some rulers and patrons encouraged the pursuit of knowledge, seeking wealth, longevity, or power, others feared it. Alchemists could influence economies, challenge orthodox religious doctrine, and inspire independent thought. This tension underscores a recurring theme in the history of forbidden knowledge. The more powerful the insight, the more threatening it becomes to those who seek to control society. The alchemist's fire, like the hidden wisdom of the ancients, is both illumination and danger, and its custodians must navigate a perilous landscape to preserve its secrets. The symbolism embedded in alchemical practice is also worth noting. Lead represents ignorance, base desires, and unrefined potential. Gold represents enlightenment, mastery, and spiritual refinement. Mercury embodies fluidity, transformation, and the invisible forces connecting all things. Sulfur symbolizes passion and the soul's essence. These elements were not mere chemicals. They were allegories for inner states, for the journey of consciousness through challenge, refinement, and awakening. In the quiet chambers of alchemical laboratories, the practitioner was engaged in a dialogue with the universe itself, translating the language of matter into understanding of self and cosmos. By the Renaissance, alchemy had become both an art and a science, practiced in courts and monasteries, in workshops and laboratories. Alchemists like Paracelsus, Cornelius Agrippa, and later Isaac Newton were heirs to this lineage, blending Hermetic principles with observation, experimentation, and mystical insight. The alchemist's fire had survived the fall of empires, the destruction of scrolls, and centuries of secrecy, becoming a living tradition that connected the ancients with the modern era. Its essence was the same: knowledge as transformation, insight as power, and the pursuit of hidden truth as both sacred and dangerous. And so, the alchemist stands as a bridge between the past and the future. In the glow of the furnace, the flame reflects not only the potential of metals but the potential of consciousness itself. The work is demanding, fraught with risk, and often misunderstood, but it carries within it the same thread that runs from the Magi, through Hermes, and across the mystery schools of antiquity. The recognition that hidden knowledge is alive, transformative, and essential to human evolution. The alchemist's fire is a symbol, a tool, and a reminder that those who dare to engage with the hidden forces of the world are called not only to seek but to act with courage, wisdom, and humility. As the Renaissance dawned over Europe, a subtle revolution was taking place, not in armies or parliaments, but in the shadowed chambers and candlelit libraries of secretive groups. The knowledge preserved by the Magi, philosophers, Hermes Trismegistus, and alchemists had begun to coalesce into something more organized, more deliberate: the emergence of secret societies. These were not clubs for socializing or mere philosophical discussion. They were custodians of forbidden wisdom, guardians of knowledge that had survived the erasure of empires and the flames of orthodoxy. Within their ranks, scholars, alchemists, mystics, and thinkers sought not only to preserve this lineage, but to understand it, experiment with it, and transmit it to those capable of carrying its weight. The earliest societies were shrouded in ritual, symbolism, and secrecy. They operated under the principle that knowledge is dangerous in the wrong hands, that revelation without preparation could be catastrophic. Meetings were held in hidden rooms, behind closed doors, or beneath the floorboards of convents and noble estates. Initiation ceremonies tested courage, discernment, and commitment, demanding that aspirants demonstrate both intellectual capacity and moral integrity. These rituals were not mere theatrics. They were designed to refine perception, awaken insight, and instill the discipline necessary to navigate the hidden currents of the universe. Those who failed, or who betrayed the trust of the group, were expelled or erased from the record entirely, leaving only whispers of their existence. Among the most influential of these emerging societies were the Rosicrucians, who appeared in the early 17th century with proclamations of secret wisdom and spiritual mastery. Their texts spoke of alchemy, Hermetic philosophy, and cosmic law, claiming a lineage that stretched back to the ancient Egyptians and the Hermetic masters. They promised transformation, enlightenment, and access to knowledge that had been deliberately hidden from the masses. Yet they also demanded secrecy, discipline, and ethical responsibility. Their writings were intentionally cryptic, layered with allegory and symbolism, ensuring that only those with sufficient insight could interpret their meaning. To read a Rosicrucian text was to embark on an initiation, a journey as perilous and transformative as the alchemical experiments it described. Simultaneously, Freemasonry was taking shape, drawing inspiration from the guilds of stonemasons who had constructed Europe's great cathedrals. But Freemasonry was more than a trade organization. It incorporated symbolic teachings, allegorical rituals, and moral instruction, blending architecture, mathematics, and Hermetic philosophy into a coherent system. Members were taught that the visible world is a reflection of deeper, invisible truths, and that the pursuit of knowledge, character, and self-mastery are intertwined. The initiation rites were designed to challenge perception, to awaken understanding, and to instill a sense of connection to the lineage of secret wisdom stretching back to the ancient world. What is striking about these societies is their emphasis on preservation and transmission. Unlike public institutions or universities, which were subject to political or religious control, secret societies could maintain continuity across generations, across borders, and even in the face of persecution. Knowledge was transmitted orally, through symbols, and in coded writings, ensuring that it survived even when texts were destroyed or exiled. This made the societies living vessels of forbidden wisdom, carrying the thread of human insight from antiquity to the modern era. The careful stewardship of knowledge became both a responsibility and a defining feature of their existence. The motivations of these societies were not merely intellectual. They were spiritual and ethical. Members understood that power, insight, and mastery over hidden forces carried responsibility. The teachings they preserved could elevate consciousness or wreak havoc if misused. Initiates were trained to perceive subtle energies, understand cosmic correspondences, and navigate the interplay between the visible and invisible. Ethical behavior, self-discipline, and moral discernment were considered essential, for knowledge without virtue could become destructive. In this sense, the secret societies functioned as schools of wisdom, spiritual orders, and custodians of a dangerous but transformative inheritance. The influence of these societies extended beyond their clandestine meetings. Their ideas infiltrated literature, philosophy, and even politics. Writers and thinkers who encountered Rosicrucian and Masonic thought were inspired to explore hidden truths in their own work, often embedding symbolism and allegory that would challenge generations of readers. The intellectual climate of the Renaissance, with its emphasis on rediscovery, exploration, and synthesis, provided fertile ground for these ideas to flourish. Secret societies were both participants in and catalysts for this broader cultural awakening, ensuring that the currents of forbidden knowledge continued to shape human thought, subtly and persistently. It is important to recognize that secrecy was not mere paranoia. It was necessity. Knowledge is power, and in the wrong hands, power can be destructive. Across history, from the burning of scrolls in Alexandria to the suppression of alchemical texts, we see a recurring pattern. Wisdom is preserved in secret because the world is not yet ready for it. The societies that emerged during the Renaissance understood this pattern, and they acted accordingly. They encoded, encrypted, and veiled their knowledge, passing it only to those who demonstrated insight, courage, and responsibility. In this way, they became not just guardians, but filters, ensuring that only the prepared could access the most dangerous and transformative truths. The rituals, symbols, and structures of these societies also reflect a deep continuity with earlier traditions. Initiation ceremonies echo the mystery schools of Eleusis. Alchemical metaphors trace back to the Hermetica, and the ethical imperatives mirror the teachings of the Magi and Greek philosophers. In studying these societies, one begins to see that history is not a series of disconnected events, but a continuous thread of inquiry, preservation, and transformation. Knowledge is passed from one generation to the next, often hidden, often obscured, yet always persistent, like a river running beneath the surface of visible history. By the end of the Renaissance, secret societies had become a defining feature of the intellectual landscape of Europe. They embodied the persistence of forbidden knowledge, the courage of those willing to preserve and explore it, and the ethical and spiritual framework necessary for its responsible use. Their influence would ripple forward into the Enlightenment, the occult revival of the 18th century, and the esoteric currents that still flow beneath the surface of modern thought. And through it all, the same essential questions persist. What is knowledge? Who is ready to wield it? And what price must be paid for the privilege of understanding what the world has tried to hide? In the candlelit halls of Rosicrucian lodges, the stone chambers of Masonic halls, and the hidden libraries of Europe, the seekers of knowledge continued their work, honoring a lineage that stretched back to the Magi, the philosophers of Greece, and the Hermetic masters of Egypt. They understood that forbidden knowledge is a living force, delicate, dangerous, and transformative. To engage with it is to step into a tradition of courage, insight, and responsibility. And the story of these societies reminds us that even in the face of oppression, persecution, and secrecy, the human desire to understand the hidden patterns of existence cannot be extinguished. The Renaissance was a period of awakening, a time when humanity began to peel back the veils of ignorance and glimpse the interconnectedness of the cosmos. Yet beneath the surface of its art, science, and literature, another current flowed, one of hidden knowledge, secrecy, and subtle symbolism. The occult, preserved and cultivated by secret societies, Hermetic scholars, and alchemists, was quietly shaping the minds of artists, inventors, and thinkers. It was a world in which knowledge was encoded in paint, geometry, and musical composition, a world where the visible beauty of the material reflected the invisible patterns of the spiritual. Artists such as Leonardo da Vinci, Sandro Botticelli, and Hieronymus Bosch were not merely painters. They were initiates into a language of symbols, a vocabulary that bridged the natural and the divine. In their works, ordinary landscapes, figures, and objects often contained layers of meaning visible only to those attuned to hermetic, alchemical, or mystical principles. A spiral in a painting might represent the cosmic order. A seemingly random constellation of figures might encode philosophical or esoteric ideas. Each brushstroke, each architectural detail, was a cipher, a challenge to the observer to perceive deeper truths. For those without the key, the works remained exquisite yet opaque. For the initiated, they were maps to hidden wisdom. Science, too, was infused with occult thinking. Renaissance inventors and mathematicians did not separate the study of nature from the study of the cosmos. Astronomy, anatomy, and engineering were intertwined with Hermetic philosophy. The work of Copernicus, Kepler, and Galileo, though revolutionary in empirical terms, was also informed by centuries of Hermetic and alchemical understanding. They approached the universe as a living, intelligible system, one in which observation, mathematics, and imagination were inseparable. Knowledge of the stars, the elements, and the forces that govern life was simultaneously practical and mystical, scientific and spiritual. The Renaissance mind understood that the hidden and the visible were aspects of the same reality. The influence of secret societies is evident in the patronage networks of the time. Wealthy nobles, monarchs, and church leaders often supported artists, architects, and scholars who were affiliated with Rosicrucian, Masonic, or other clandestine groups. These patrons were not merely collectors of beauty or curiosities. They were participants in a broader intellectual and spiritual movement, investing in works that encoded hidden knowledge. In this environment, art and science became vehicles for the transmission of wisdom, a way of preserving insights that might otherwise be suppressed by authority or lost to time. Knowledge that could not be openly published or discussed found expression in paintings, sculptures, diagrams, and instruments, hiding in plain sight while guiding future generations. Consider Leonardo da Vinci, whose notebooks are filled with both meticulous anatomical studies and enigmatic sketches of machines, symbols, and geometric designs. At first glance, these appear as exercises in observation and invention, but closer inspection reveals layers of coded meaning, reflections of Hermetic principles, and meditations on the unity of mind, matter, and cosmos. The Vitruvian Man, for example, is not only a study of human proportion but a symbol of the microcosm reflecting the macrocosm, a visual expression of the ancient maxim, as above, so below. Every proportion, every ratio is deliberate, a meditation on balance, harmony, and hidden order. Similarly, Botticelli's works, often interpreted as simple mythological scenes, contain subtle esoteric messages. The placement of figures, gestures, and even the flow of hair and drapery can encode Hermetic, Neoplatonic, and alchemical principles. The Renaissance fascination with the classical world was not purely aesthetic. It was also a conduit for transmitting philosophical and mystical knowledge preserved from antiquity. Artists and scholars engaged in a secret conversation across centuries, weaving a thread of insight that connected Egyptian priests, Greek philosophers, and Hermetic masters to the emerging European intellectual landscape. Science and art were mutually reinforcing. Understanding the cosmos, the elements, and human anatomy provided material for symbolic expression. Conversely, artistic meditation on forms, proportions, and geometry enhanced insight into hidden patterns. Alchemical laboratories, for example, were both experimental and symbolic spaces, blending chemical reactions with meditative practices. Scholars studied celestial patterns while designing instruments, observed human physiology while contemplating the structure of the universe, and documented their insights in works that were both practical guides and encoded maps for initiates. The Renaissance mind recognized no strict separation between knowledge, perception, and insight. The pursuit of hidden truth was holistic, integrating multiple disciplines and layers of understanding. Yet the presence of the occult in Renaissance art and science also highlights the constant tension between revelation and suppression. Knowledge that was transformative could also be dangerous. The church and political authorities maintained vigilance over what could be published, taught, or displayed. Scholars, alchemists, and artists often had to navigate this landscape with extreme care, encoding wisdom in symbols, allegories, and metaphors. The work that survives to this day is often a testament to both courage and ingenuity, revealing the depth of human understanding while masking it from those unprepared to perceive it. The visible beauty of Renaissance achievements conceals an invisible architecture of insight, a hidden layer that rewards patience, study, and awareness. The legacy of this period is profound. The seeds planted by the Hermetic and alchemical traditions in Renaissance Europe continue to influence modern thought, from scientific methodology to philosophical inquiry, from architectural symbolism to literature and even psychology. By studying art, instruments, and manuscripts from this era, we gain not only aesthetic appreciation but access to centuries of hidden wisdom, carefully preserved and transmitted through layers of secrecy and symbolism. The Renaissance thus represents not only the rebirth of classical knowledge, but the flowering of a hidden tradition that had survived empires, persecutions, and centuries of concealment. Through all of this, one idea emerges clearly. The pursuit of hidden knowledge is both dangerous and transformative. It is a path that demands patience, insight, courage, and ethical awareness. It is a dialogue with history, with the cosmos, and with the self. In Renaissance art and science, we see that hidden knowledge does not always announce itself. It waits, encoded in brushstrokes, instruments, and geometric ratios, offering its gifts only to those willing to engage deeply and responsibly. The legacy of the secret societies, the alchemists, and the Hermetic scholars is thus alive in these works, a living testament to the enduring human desire to understand, to perceive, and to align with the hidden patterns of existence. And as we gaze upon a painting, a manuscript, or an instrument from this era, we are reminded that the visible world often carries secrets beneath its surface. The Renaissance teaches us that insight is never neutral, that beauty and utility can hide profound wisdom, and that the pursuit of hidden knowledge is a journey that requires both courage and discernment. Those who follow the path of the occult, Hermetic, or alchemical traditions do not merely seek facts. They seek understanding, connection, and transformation, the very spark that has driven humanity across millennia, from the deserts of Persia to the laboratories and lodges of Europe, and ultimately into the present. Throughout European history, knowledge that lay hidden in the Hermetic, alchemical, and mystical traditions rarely remained isolated to laboratories or secret lodges. It seeped into the corridors of power, influencing rulers, shaping strategies, and quietly directing the course of nations. Kings and princes, aware of the forces beyond ordinary perception, often sought counsel from those versed in the occult, hoping to gain insight into destiny, to secure advantage over rivals, and to align themselves with forces they could neither see nor fully comprehend. The line between governance and hidden knowledge was porous, and the consequences of this interplay could be as profound as they were dangerous. Rulers of Renaissance and early modern Europe frequently employed astrologers, alchemists, and Hermetic scholars to advise them. The positions of the stars, the timing of eclipses, and the alignment of planets were interpreted not as superstition, but as tools for decision-making, whether to wage war, negotiate treaties, or choose auspicious dates for coronations and marriages. Monarchs who dismissed these advisors often risked disaster. Those who embraced them sometimes gained uncanny advantage. Yet the stakes were enormous. To rely on forbidden knowledge was to flirt with forces beyond control, to submit to patterns and energies that could as easily betray as empower. Those who wielded such knowledge were at once revered, feared, and mistrusted. Alchemists, in particular, found themselves in positions of influence. Beyond their philosophical pursuits, they were sought after for the promise of wealth, longevity, and even political leverage. The philosopher's stone was rumored not only to transmute metals but to grant health, vitality, and insight, a potent allure for rulers desperate to secure power and legacy. Some monarchs funded laboratories lavishly, employing alchemists to produce gold or medicinal elixirs. But the alchemists' true gift lay not in the material, but in their understanding of natural and hidden laws. They could predict outcomes, discern patterns in political maneuvering, and advise on matters of subtle strategy. This made them indispensable yet precarious figures, operating on the knife edge between reverence and suspicion. The influence of the occult extended beyond individual rulers to the shaping of nations. Secret societies, Rosicrucians, and Masonic lodges sometimes acted as networks of information, subtle influencers in courts and councils. Their members were often scholars, diplomats, and advisors capable of understanding and manipulating political, social, and economic currents. By studying these hidden patterns, they could guide decisions, advise leaders, and even sway outcomes in ways invisible to ordinary observers. It was not magic in the theatrical sense, but a profound application of insight, understanding the web of cause and effect, human psychology, and cosmic correspondences. The knowledge of the hidden became a tool for shaping history itself. Yet this interplay was fraught with danger. Knowledge that influenced power was dangerous to possess and even more dangerous to deploy. A miscalculation could cost life, throne, or dynasty. Secret advisors, alchemists, and occult practitioners risked execution if their counsel failed, if their predictions faltered, or if their knowledge was perceived as heretical or subversive. The line between wisdom and treason was thin, and many fell victim to envy, paranoia, or political intrigue. The hidden currents that guided rulers were as treacherous as the visible battlefield, and navigating them required not only intelligence but patience, discretion, and courage. The occult also played a role in the ideological battles of the era. As empires expanded and religious authority consolidated, forbidden knowledge became both a weapon and a target. Monarchs and advisors used hermetic and mystical principles to frame arguments, guide policies, or justify actions. Conversely, institutions wary of this influence sought to suppress, control, or co-opt it. Alchemy, astrology, and Hermeticism were alternately celebrated and condemned, depending on the political climate and the personal inclinations of rulers. The pursuit of forbidden knowledge was never neutral. It intersected with ambition, fear, faith, and destiny, often producing consequences that were both subtle and far-reaching. Notable examples illustrate the stakes. Elizabeth I of England relied heavily on advisors versed in astrology and secret knowledge, not merely for divination, but for strategic insight into political rivals and potential threats. The courts of France and Spain employed alchemists and Hermetic scholars to advise on everything from warfare to diplomacy, believing that understanding hidden laws could produce material and strategic advantage. Even the founding of colonies and the timing of expeditions were sometimes informed by celestial calculations and esoteric insight. Knowledge became a tool, a lever, and a weapon, but always one that demanded respect and understanding. In some cases, the occult served as a stabilizing force. Leaders who could perceive hidden patterns of human behavior, economic cycles, or cosmic alignment were better equipped to anticipate crises and manage uncertainty. Hermetic and alchemical knowledge offered frameworks for interpreting the unpredictable, for finding coherence in chaos. Secret societies and their members were, in essence, advisors not only to rulers but to history itself, ensuring that insight and foresight tempered ambition and desire. The hidden currents of wisdom could guide nations toward stability and prosperity, though always under the shadow of danger and potential misuse. Yet, power and knowledge are always intertwined with secrecy. The same forces that offered guidance also inspired fear. The influence of occult practitioners was often exaggerated, mythologized, or vilified, particularly when political or religious rivals sought to discredit them. Stories of magical manipulation, poisonings, and hidden rituals became legend, blending truth and imagination. The allure of the hidden, the fear it inspired, and the reality of its influence created a fertile ground for conspiracy, myth, and rumor, a narrative that persists to this day in popular imagination. Ultimately, the intersection of occult knowledge and political power demonstrates a profound truth. Insight into hidden forces has always carried consequence. Knowledge is never neutral. It shapes the world as much as it illuminates it. Those who wield it must balance ambition with ethics, courage with humility, and perception with discretion. The history of Europe is littered with examples of rulers, advisors, and secret societies who navigated these dangerous currents, sometimes successfully, sometimes at devastating cost. And the lesson endures. The pursuit of hidden knowledge is inseparable from the dynamics of power, influence, and human ambition, revealing that history itself is as much shaped by what is unseen as by what is openly recorded. The story of occult influence on political power reminds us that knowledge can be both liberation and danger, illumination and weapon. In the hands of the prepared and ethical, it can guide nations, shape destiny, and preserve wisdom. In the hands of the reckless or ambitious, it can lead to chaos, betrayal, and destruction. And through it all, the line between hidden truth and forbidden knowledge remains the same, delicate, perilous, and profoundly consequential. Across courts, councils, and secret lodges, the legacy of the Hermetic, alchemical, and mystical traditions demonstrates that the pursuit of insight is never without risk, and that those who seek to understand the hidden patterns of the world are inevitably drawn into the currents of history itself. The dark forests and cobblestone streets of early modern Europe were alive with fear, suspicion, and whispers of forbidden knowledge. For centuries, secret wisdom had been cultivated in the shadows. Alchemical texts, Hermetic treatises, astrological charts, and mystical practices that promised insight, transformation, and power. Yet, To the fearful and the uninitiated, these same practices appeared dangerous, heretical, and uncontrollable. The result was a wave of persecution that swept across the continent. The infamous witch hunts, a relentless campaign fueled not only by superstition but by the fear of knowledge itself. What began as suspicion of unusual practices or deviance from social norms quickly escalated into systematic terror. Women and men who experimented with herbs, practiced healing, or studied celestial patterns were often accused of consorting with dark forces. The link between magic, knowledge, and danger was deeply ingrained in cultural consciousness. To possess understanding beyond the accepted doctrines of church and state was to challenge authority itself. And when knowledge was feared, those who wielded it were branded as witches, sorcerers, or heretics. They became scapegoats for social unrest, personal grievances, and the anxieties of a world in transition. These hunts were not random. They followed patterns of power and control. Communities under strain, from famine, disease, war, or political upheaval, sought explanations for suffering in the supernatural. Accusations of witchcraft provided a tangible enemy, a personification of chaos that could be punished. Yet beneath the surface, there was an even deeper fear, the fear of knowledge that could destabilize society. Hermetic, alchemical, and occult wisdom offered insights into nature, the human mind, and the cosmos that ordinary people and institutions were unprepared to confront. Those who carried even fragments of this knowledge were seen as threats to the established order. The trials themselves were often grotesque exercises in the manipulation of fear. Accusations were frequently based on rumor, envy, or the mere possession of books, scrolls, or objects deemed suspicious. Torture was used to extract confessions, and these confessions were then recorded as evidence, creating a cycle of terror that fed itself. In some cases, entire families, communities, or villages were swept into hysteria. Knowledge was not merely suppressed, it became a crime punishable by death. Yet in these moments of darkness, hidden knowledge often survived, preserved in memory, oral tradition, or clandestine writings carefully concealed from inquisitors. The symbolism of these events is profound. Fire, which had long been a symbol of transformation, illumination, and divine insight, became a tool of annihilation. The pyres that consumed accused witches mirrored earlier efforts to destroy forbidden texts in Alexandria or during the medieval suppression of Hermetic and alchemical works. Yet fire also symbolizes endurance. Just as the flames did not completely erase the knowledge encoded in surviving texts, the persecution of practitioners could not fully extinguish human curiosity or the pursuit of hidden wisdom. Sparks of insight survived, passing into future generations, waiting for those prepared to reclaim them. The witch hunts also reveal the gendered dimensions of forbidden knowledge. Women, often healers, midwives, or herbalists, were disproportionately targeted. Their knowledge, rooted in observation, experience, and intuitive understanding of the natural world, was seen as dangerous in a patriarchal society that sought to control power and information. Accusations of witchcraft were, in many cases, accusations of forbidden understanding, an attempt to suppress independent thought and autonomy. These women were not only victims of superstition but of a broader societal anxiety about knowledge, power, and the capacity to influence unseen forces. In addition to gender, social status played a critical role. The lower classes, often possessing practical knowledge of herbs, healing, and natural cycles, were vulnerable to accusations. Yet even nobles and scholars were not immune. Those who studied astrology, alchemy, or Hermetic texts often had to operate in extreme secrecy, aware that their pursuit of knowledge could bring ruin. The witch hunts, therefore, were not merely a series of isolated tragedies. They were a systematic effort to control knowledge itself, to enforce orthodoxy, and to maintain the structures of power by instilling fear. The intellectual consequences were staggering. Laboratories were abandoned, texts hidden or destroyed, and experimentation curtailed. For a time, the pursuit of hidden wisdom became dangerous, its custodians forced into secrecy, exile, or death. Yet the very intensity of this suppression underscores the power of forbidden knowledge. What is feared is rarely harmless. What is attacked is rarely inconsequential. The witch hunts demonstrate that knowledge, especially knowledge that illuminates hidden patterns, shapes destiny, or challenges authority, has always been a source of anxiety for those who wield power without insight. And yet, even amidst persecution, resilience emerged. Secret societies, alchemists, and Hermetic scholars adapted. They developed new codes, allegories, and symbolic systems to preserve their teachings. Oral transmission became a lifeline, ensuring that fragments of knowledge survived in the memories of initiates. Those who fled persecution carried wisdom to distant lands, spreading Hermetic and alchemical thought to new regions, often in ways that would only be understood centuries later. The danger of suppression paradoxically strengthened the tradition, forging communities of practitioners capable of navigating both secrecy and insight. The psychological dimension is equally compelling. Fear of knowledge of the hidden has always provoked extreme responses. The witch hunts exemplify the tension between human curiosity and human anxiety, the conflict between illumination and control. To understand the world in ways others cannot is both a privilege and a threat. To wield knowledge without societal sanction can result in admiration or annihilation. These dynamics have repeated across history, from the destruction of Hermetic scrolls in Alexandria to the suppression of alchemical texts in medieval Europe. The witch hunts are one of the darkest chapters in this ongoing struggle, a vivid reminder of the cost of insight in a world governed by fear. Ultimately, the witch hunts teach a profound lesson. Knowledge is never neutral. It carries consequences, responsibilities, and dangers. The pursuit of hidden wisdom has always been intertwined with the dynamics of fear, power, and control. Those who seek it must navigate not only intellectual challenges but societal, political, and psychological obstacles. And yet, the endurance of Hermetic, alchemical, and mystical traditions through this era of terror reminds us that truth has a resilience that surpasses persecution. Forbidden knowledge survives because it is powerful, transformative, and essential to human growth, waiting patiently for those capable of understanding and bearing its weight. The fires that consumed accused witches illuminate more than flesh and bone. They illuminate human fear of insight itself, the terror of what cannot be controlled, and the enduring struggle between knowledge and authority. And from the shadows of this persecution, a thread of continuity emerges, a lineage of wisdom that survives in symbols, texts, rituals, and human memory, linking the Magi, the Hermetic masters, the alchemists, and the secret societies of Europe in an unbroken chain. It is a testament to the enduring human quest to perceive what others fear, to understand what others suppress, and to carry forward knowledge that is as dangerous as it is transformative. For centuries, alchemy was both a mystical pursuit and a practical one. Hidden within its cryptic symbols, allegories, and secretive practices lay the seeds of modern science. Alchemists sought to transform base metals into gold, to uncover the philosopher's stone, and to create elixirs of life. But beneath these seemingly fantastical aims was a rigorous method of observation, experimentation, and documentation. In pursuit of hidden truths, alchemists began to study matter systematically, recording reactions, properties, and transformations with painstaking precision. Every furnace, flask, and crucible became a laboratory, every experiment a meditation on both nature and the human soul. In this way, alchemy was a bridge between mysticism and empirical inquiry, a discipline in which the hidden forces of the universe could be perceived, tested, and understood. The transformation from alchemy to chemistry was gradual and fraught with tension. Hermetic wisdom emphasized the interconnectedness of all things, teaching that the microcosm reflected the macrocosm and that every substance contained within it a hidden essence. Early chemists inherited these ideas but began to focus on reproducible results, quantification, and experimentation that could be verified and communicated. Paracelsus, for instance, integrated medicine, alchemy, and observation, laying the groundwork for pharmacology while still preserving mystical principles. Robert Boyle, often considered the father of modern chemistry, distilled the practical methods of alchemy into rigorous scientific experimentation, demonstrating that substances could be studied systematically without losing sight of the philosophical questions they raised. The subtlety of alchemical practice prepared practitioners for a world in which experimentation itself was dangerous. Many alchemists had to operate in secrecy due to the potential for persecution or the fear of intellectual theft. Their knowledge was precious, and revealing it too broadly could invite suspicion, accusation, or betrayal. Yet it was precisely this meticulous, cautious approach that enabled alchemical insights to evolve into scientific method. Observation, replication, careful notation. These were the skills honed in secret laboratories, later adapted to the emerging framework of chemistry and empirical science. What had begun as mystical experimentation became, over centuries, a disciplined exploration of nature's principles. The alchemical emphasis on transformation is particularly striking. Alchemists observed that substances could change state, combine, or separate in ways that were governed by natural laws. They documented color changes, reactions to heat, and the properties of acids and bases, often encoding these findings in allegory to protect their discoveries. These meticulous observations, though couched in mystical language, formed the foundation for modern chemical understanding. The philosopher's stone, while largely symbolic, inspired experiments in metallurgy, distillation, and purification. The pursuit of elixirs of life led to advances in pharmacology, herbal medicine, and chemical compounds. Hidden knowledge, once seen as magical, became empirical without losing its roots in wonder and mystery. The transition also highlights the continuity between occult and scientific thought. Many early chemists were deeply aware of Hermetic and alchemical teachings, using them to guide inquiry and experimentation. The principles of balance, correspondence, and hidden structure informed their methods, even as the language shifted from allegory to measurement. The philosophical underpinnings of alchemy, that the world is structured, intelligible, and capable of transformation, provided both motivation and framework for the systematic investigation that would define early modern science. In essence, the pursuit of hidden knowledge did not end with persecution or secrecy. It evolved, finding new forms in laboratories, texts, and instruments. The laboratories of early chemists were still charged with a sense of ritual. Heating, mixing, and distilling were not merely physical actions. They were exercises in perception and discipline, requiring attention, patience, and intuition. The practitioner learned to observe subtle changes, to predict outcomes, and to interpret results in the context of a larger system of correspondences. In this sense, chemistry retained the alchemical integration of mind, matter, and cosmos. Experiments were not divorced from philosophy or spirituality. They were grounded in the belief that understanding matter could illuminate broader truths about nature, life, and human potential. The emergence of chemistry also reflects the resilience of forbidden knowledge. Despite the suppression of alchemical texts, the destruction of scrolls, and the persecution of practitioners, the principles embedded in these teachings survived. They adapted to new intellectual climates, survived in coded manuscripts, and were carried forward by practitioners willing to navigate the dangers of secrecy. By the 17th and 18th centuries, this hidden wisdom had begun to surface in ways that could be widely studied, forming the foundation of modern chemistry, pharmacology, and material science. The hidden truths of the past, once feared and persecuted, had found a new home in empirical method, observation, and experimentation. The narrative of transformation is not merely historical. It is symbolic. Just as base metals were transmuted into gold in the alchemist's furnace, mystical and hidden knowledge was transformed into a systematic, repeatable science. The principles remained, though the language shifted. Correspondence became chemical reaction, balance became measurement, and intuition became observation. The legacy of the Hermetic and alchemical traditions endured, not as superstition, but as methodology, philosophy, and a continuing inquiry into the hidden structure of the natural world. Ultimately, the evolution from alchemy to chemistry illustrates a profound continuity in human pursuit. The quest to understand, to transform, and to engage with hidden forces. Knowledge, whether mystical or scientific, carries power, risk, and responsibility. Alchemy prepared the mind for curiosity, experimentation, and insight, while chemistry translated that curiosity into reproducible understanding. The line between mysticism and science is, therefore, not a divide but a continuum, reflecting centuries of human effort to perceive what is invisible, to understand what is obscured, and to act upon it responsibly. The story of alchemy and chemistry reminds us that forbidden knowledge is never entirely lost. It may be suppressed, misunderstood, or transformed, but it endures, evolving in form while retaining its essence. The pursuit of the hidden, the unseen, and the misunderstood has driven human inquiry across millennia, leaving a legacy of wisdom that connects the mystical practices of the ancients with the empirical science of the modern world. In every flask, every distillation, and every experiment lies the echo of firelit laboratories, secret societies, and courageous seekers who refuse to let knowledge perish. The Renaissance, often celebrated as a period of artistic brilliance and scientific awakening, was also a hidden renaissance, one in which esoteric knowledge, mystical philosophy, and magical symbolism flourished alongside public achievement. Beneath the grandeur of cathedrals, the brushstrokes of master painters, and the geometric precision of architecture, there existed a subtle, secretive current, a revival of Hermetic wisdom, alchemical symbolism, and the study of hidden forces. This was not mere curiosity or eccentricity. It was an intellectual and spiritual movement that sought to reveal the unseen structures governing reality, to align the human mind with the cosmic order, and to explore the mysterious interplay between matter, energy, and consciousness. Artists of the period were not only creators of beauty but initiates into a deeper language of symbols. The paintings of Botticelli, Leonardo da Vinci, and Raphael are rife with hidden correspondences, gestures, proportions, and placements that encode Hermetic and alchemical principles. A spiral of shells, the flow of hair, or the arc of a celestial body might represent cosmic harmony, spiritual ascent, or the balance between microcosm and macrocosm. To the uninitiated, these elements appear as aesthetic flourish, but to the adept, they are visual prayers, meditations on universal law, and maps to hidden knowledge. Art became a vessel for transmission, a medium through which forbidden wisdom could survive and speak across generations without attracting the scrutiny of those who feared it. Magic, in this context, was not superstition. It was a disciplined practice of understanding and influencing hidden forces. Renaissance magicians and philosophers studied correspondences between the celestial and terrestrial, the physical and the spiritual. Rituals, symbols, and meditative practices were designed to harmonize human consciousness with cosmic patterns, to gain insight into the unseen dynamics of the world. These practices were codified within secret societies and learned circles, preserving the methodologies of ancient mystery schools. Initiates understood that knowledge alone was insufficient. Mastery required discipline, perception, and ethical responsibility. The goal was not domination but alignment, insight, and transformation, the very essence of esoteric wisdom. The integration of philosophy further deepened the intellectual landscape. Neoplatonism, revived from the texts of Plotinus and Proclus, provided a framework in which beauty, mathematics, and morality were interconnected. The world was seen as a living hierarchy, with matter, spirit, and intellect woven together. Human beings, as microcosms of the universe, could perceive and influence higher realities through disciplined study and contemplative practice. This philosophical lens made the pursuit of hidden knowledge both ethical and practical, guiding how alchemists, artists, and scholars approached their work. Wisdom was not abstract. It was actionable, a bridge between perception, experience, and insight. Alchemy, continuing to evolve alongside art and philosophy, served as both metaphor and method. The transformations observed in the laboratory, the change of color, the separation and combination of elements, were mirrored in the human soul. The Hermetic maxim, as above, so below, guided experiments not only in metals and minerals but in understanding the self. Every process of transmutation in the lab was a lesson in patience, observation, and the refinement of perception. To practice alchemy was to practice attention itself, a discipline that connected the physical world to the inner landscapes of thought, imagination, and intuition. The hidden laboratory thus became a spiritual training ground, a place where the outer world and the inner world converged. Secret societies played a crucial role in fostering this esoteric renaissance. Rosicrucians, early Freemasons, and other clandestine groups became conduits for Hermetic and mystical teachings, offering guidance in interpretation, ritual, and application. Membership was selective, initiation rigorous, and instruction layered in symbolism designed to preserve knowledge while challenging perception. These societies were not mere social clubs. They were schools of insight, laboratories of consciousness, and guardians of a lineage that stretched back to the Magi of Persia and the mystery schools of ancient Greece and Egypt. Through these networks, the esoteric renaissance spread across Europe, influencing intellectual circles, artistic production, and scientific inquiry. The impact of hidden knowledge on Renaissance culture cannot be overstated. In literature, authors wove Hermetic and alchemical motifs into poetry and prose, embedding philosophical reflections within allegorical tales. In architecture, sacred geometry and symbolic proportions guided the design of cathedrals, palaces, and public spaces, ensuring that structures reflected the harmony of the cosmos. Music, too, was informed by esoteric principles, with harmonic ratios and tonal patterns reflecting cosmic and ethical order. Across disciplines, the hidden currents of wisdom shaped expression, strategy, and the pursuit of excellence. The public achievements of the era, therefore, were inseparable from the secret knowledge that guided them. Yet this esoteric renaissance also faced tension and danger. The church, monarchs, and political authorities often viewed forbidden knowledge as threatening, heretical, or subversive. Scholars, artists, and magicians had to navigate a delicate balance, revealing insight without provoking persecution, encoding meaning without revealing secrets, and practicing wisdom without attracting the suspicion of those who feared what they could not comprehend. The culture of secrecy was not mere caution. It was a necessity for survival. And in navigating this tension, the practitioners developed resilience, creativity, and subtlety, ensuring that forbidden knowledge would endure even in the face of suppression. The esoteric renaissance illustrates a profound human truth. The pursuit of hidden knowledge is never solely intellectual. It is ethical, spiritual, and psychological, demanding courage, insight, and discipline. Those who engage with the hidden are called to transform themselves even as they explore the world, to refine perception, align with natural laws, and understand the responsibilities inherent in powerful insight. Art, magic, and philosophy were not separate disciplines but facets of the same quest, each offering pathways to the comprehension of hidden structures, cosmic correspondences, and the potential for human transformation. Ultimately, the hidden currents of the Renaissance reveal that knowledge is both illumination and responsibility. The esoteric thinkers, artists, and alchemists of this period preserved insights that were once dangerous and forbidden, transmitting them through symbols, rituals, and practice. Their work reminds us that true understanding often lies beneath the surface, that wisdom requires discipline and courage, and that the pursuit of hidden knowledge is inseparable from the cultivation of character. The esoteric Renaissance was a revival not just of art or science, but of human capacity to perceive the unseen, to engage with what is hidden, and to navigate the delicate balance between revelation and secrecy. Through paintings, manuscripts, instruments, and rituals, the hidden wisdom of the Renaissance survives, speaking across centuries to those willing to see beyond the obvious. It is a legacy of courage, insight, and careful stewardship, a reminder that knowledge, when handled responsibly, can illuminate not only the world but the human soul. And in this, the esoteric Renaissance becomes more than a historical phenomenon. It is a testament to the enduring human desire to uncover, understand, and align with the hidden patterns of existence, a current of illumination flowing quietly beneath the surface of history, waiting to be perceived by those prepared to receive it. As European ships cut through uncharted waters during the Age of Discovery, they carried more than sails, compasses, and maps. They carried the invisible influence of forbidden knowledge, esoteric traditions, and occult guidance. Exploration was not merely a matter of geography, trade, or conquest. It was an encounter with the unknown, a voyage into both external and internal worlds. Navigators, scholars, and patrons often drew on Hermetic principles, mystical symbolism, and secretive wisdom to interpret the stars, the seas, and the hidden patterns of nature. The boundaries between magic, science, and intuition were porous, and those who sought to chart the world often relied on knowledge that had been cultivated in secrecy for centuries. The celestial sphere was both map and guide. Astronomers and astrologers provided navigators with tools far beyond the capabilities of ordinary observation. The positions of planets, lunar cycles, and celestial alignments informed timing, route selection, and even strategic decisions during long voyages. Hermetic philosophy reinforced the understanding that the macrocosm mirrored the microcosm. The movements of the heavens corresponded to events on Earth. Explorers who could interpret these signals were considered blessed with foresight, capable of anticipating storms, tides, and the hidden dangers of distant lands. For them, the voyage was as much a spiritual undertaking as a commercial or territorial one, a test of courage, skill, and insight. Secret societies and occult scholars were deeply involved in the preparation for exploration. Cartography, one of the most practical disciplines, was infused with esoteric knowledge. Maps were more than topographical representations. They encoded symbolism, cosmological principles, and sometimes cryptic guidance. Latitude, longitude, and compass bearings were often combined with mystical correspondences to ensure that navigators moved in harmony with cosmic and terrestrial order. This blending of practical skill and hidden wisdom gave explorers an edge that was invisible to those relying solely on conventional methods. It was a subtle but powerful form of knowledge that could determine success or disaster on the high seas. Alchemical thought also played a role in exploration. Voyages often depended on supplies, remedies, and materials that were transported across oceans. Knowledge of herbs, minerals, and substances with purported healing properties was essential. Alchemical principles guided not only the preparation of medicines but also the understanding of natural resources in distant lands. Explorers and their patrons often sought treasures not only of gold and spices but of substances imbued with symbolic or practical power. This search for hidden elements reflected a continuity between mystical inquiry and practical discovery. The world itself was a laboratory, and every voyage a potential experiment in the intersection of nature and hidden law. The patrons of exploration, monarchs, merchants, and secretive elites, were often deeply interested in the occult dimensions of these ventures. They commissioned voyages not only for economic gain but for access to knowledge that lay hidden in distant lands. Lost texts, sacred sites, mystical traditions, and natural phenomena that might reveal new insights into the structure of the universe. Expeditions were sometimes accompanied by scholars, astrologers, and alchemists whose purpose was not merely to record observations, but to interpret signs, decode patterns, and integrate discoveries into the hidden networks of wisdom circulating among secret societies. Exploration, in this sense, was both external and internal, a pursuit of material and immaterial riches alike. Encounters with new cultures brought additional dimensions to the hidden knowledge of Europe. Indigenous traditions, spiritual practices, and local cosmologies were studied, adapted, or sometimes appropriated by European explorers and scholars. These interactions created a cross-cultural exchange of mystical and practical understanding, enriching the esoteric currents flowing through Europe. Astronomical observations, herbal remedies, and symbolic systems from distant lands were integrated into Hermetic, alchemical, and Masonic traditions, expanding the range of hidden wisdom accessible to initiates. The unknown world was both a physical territory to be mapped and a symbolic territory to be interpreted, its mysteries folded into the larger pursuit of hidden knowledge. Yet exploration was dangerous, not only from storms and hostile encounters, but from the inherent uncertainty of applying forbidden knowledge to real-world circumstances. Misreading celestial signals, misinterpreting mystical correspondences, or overreaching in the pursuit of hidden truths could lead to catastrophe. For this reason, explorers often operated under the guidance of advisors skilled in occult interpretation, astrologers who read the skies, and Hermetic scholars who could anticipate unseen challenges. The success of voyages depended not merely on seamanship but on a profound understanding of hidden forces, an understanding that required courage, discipline, and insight. The symbolism of exploration resonates deeply with the ethos of the occult. Venturing into uncharted seas mirrors the inner journey of the seeker of hidden knowledge. Just as sailors navigated currents, storms, and shifting horizons, so too did initiates navigate moral challenges, perception, and the subtle forces shaping human experience. Maps, compasses, and charts were both practical tools and symbolic representations of the broader principle. To explore the unknown is to confront risk, to embrace uncertainty, and to expand the boundaries of understanding. The external voyage and the internal quest were inseparable, each informing and illuminating the other. The impact of this hidden guidance on the age of discovery was profound. Voyages that might have ended in disaster succeeded through the careful application of both visible and invisible knowledge. Discoveries of new lands, flora, fauna, and resources were interpreted through lenses that combined science, symbolism, and Hermetic insight. The wealth and knowledge brought back to Europe were thus filtered through a complex interplay of perception, intuition, and hidden wisdom, influencing politics, science, art, and philosophy in ways that were subtle yet enduring. Exploration became not only the conquest of distance but the integration of hidden knowledge into the expanding understanding of the world. Ultimately, the occult dimension of exploration reminds us that human curiosity is inseparable from the pursuit of insight, courage, and responsibility. To venture into the unknown requires more than maps or tools. It requires perception, discipline, and an understanding of forces beyond immediate comprehension. European voyages of discovery, guided by Hermetic principles, astrological insight, and alchemical knowledge, exemplify the enduring human quest to navigate uncertainty, uncover hidden truths, and integrate the seen and unseen into a coherent vision of reality. In this way, the seas, stars, and distant lands of the Age of Discovery became not only physical spaces but metaphors for the hidden dimensions of knowledge, courage, and transformation that have shaped human history. The relationship between forbidden knowledge and organized religion has always been fraught with tension, a delicate balance of curiosity, authority, and fear. Throughout history, those who sought to uncover hidden truths, alchemists, Hermetic scholars, astrologers, and magicians, often found themselves at odds with the dogmas of the Church. Knowledge that revealed patterns beyond the sanctioned understanding of creation, life, and morality was perceived as a challenge, even a threat. The occult, in all its forms, offered insight into the cosmos, the human soul, and the forces that governed existence. But for religious authorities, insight without permission was dangerous, and secrecy became a weapon of survival for the seekers of wisdom. The Reformation and Counter-Reformation intensified these tensions. As Europe fractured along theological lines, religious institutions sought to consolidate authority, defining orthodoxy with increasing rigidity. Mystical practices, Hermetic philosophy, and alchemical experimentation were scrutinized, censored, and often condemned. Books were burned, manuscripts hidden, and practitioners forced into secrecy. Even the intellectual curiosity that had flourished during the Renaissance became suspect when it threatened ecclesiastical control. Yet the persistence of these traditions demonstrates a paradox. The more forbidden knowledge was suppressed, the more resilient and adaptive it became. Those who pursued it learned to navigate secrecy, allegory, and coded transmission, ensuring that the flame of hidden insight endured despite the weight of institutional repression. The Catholic Church, in particular, perceived the occult as a dual threat. It could undermine spiritual authority and challenge the understanding of the natural and divine order. Astrology, for instance, suggested that human lives were influenced by celestial forces, a notion that appeared to diminish the omnipotence of God in determining destiny. Alchemy and Hermeticism proposed that matter and spirit were interconnected and transformable, contradicting the Church's rigid delineation between the sacred and the profane. Practitioners of these arts were not merely theorists. They were, in the eyes of the authorities, potential disruptors of both social and theological order. To suppress, control, or eliminate them became an urgent priority, often with dramatic and violent consequences. Yet the conflict was not one-sided. Many religious figures themselves were drawn to mystical and esoteric practices. Jesuits, monks, and scholars often studied Hermetic texts in secret, seeking to reconcile forbidden knowledge with theological understanding. The boundaries between religion and occult inquiry were porous. Insight could be both a tool of devotion and a source of peril. Religious institutions, while publicly condemning heresy and sorcery, sometimes tacitly relied on the knowledge of astrologers, alchemists, and magicians. The very authorities that persecuted the occult also benefited from its insights, illustrating a tension between ideology and pragmatism, fear and utility, suppression and utilization. The fear of hidden knowledge was not abstract. It manifested in tangible persecution. Accusations of heresy, witchcraft, or sorcery often served political as well as religious ends. Intellectuals, practitioners, and even nobles could be accused when their understanding of hidden forces threatened the established hierarchy. The Inquisition, infamous for its relentless pursuit of heresy, functioned not only as a religious instrument but also as a tool of social control, policing the boundaries of knowledge and thought. Confessions extracted under duress, trials conducted under suspicion, and executions by fire created a climate in which curiosity itself became a dangerous act. Yet within this climate, the pursuit of forbidden knowledge persisted, adapting and evolving to survive. Theological debates often centered on the legitimacy of human inquiry into hidden forces. Was it hubris to seek understanding beyond what God had revealed? Or was knowledge a divine gift, intended to be cultivated and exercised responsibly? Hermetic scholars argued that wisdom itself was sacred, that understanding the cosmos, the human mind, and the hidden laws of nature was a form of communion with the divine. Religious authorities, however, often interpreted such pursuits as rebellion, equating hidden knowledge with sin, pride, and even demonic influence. The tension between these perspectives shaped centuries of intellectual history, creating a landscape in which curiosity, fear, devotion, and rebellion were inseparably intertwined. The conflict also extended to cultural expression. Art, literature, and music often incorporated esoteric and mystical themes that skirted the boundaries of religious tolerance. Symbolism, allegory, and hidden motifs allowed artists and thinkers to explore forbidden knowledge without overtly violating religious mandates. The very need for subtlety encouraged creativity, layering meaning in ways that could be deciphered only by the initiated. In this way, the tension between religion and the occult was not solely destructive. It fostered innovation, depth, and sophistication in cultural production, ensuring that hidden knowledge survived not only in texts but in enduring works of beauty and insight. The intellectual consequences of this conflict were profound. Scholars were forced to develop methods of coded communication, careful documentation, and clandestine networks. Philosophical and mystical ideas were often embedded in allegory or ritual, ensuring their survival even under the threat of censorship or persecution. Knowledge that might have been openly debated instead became secret, passed from teacher to student, patron to initiate, or across generations through carefully guarded manuscripts. This system of preservation allowed Hermetic and alchemical traditions to endure, even as public condemnation sought to erase them. The occult survived by becoming invisible, adaptable, and deeply intertwined with the social fabric of secrecy, trust, and allegiance. The tension between occult knowledge and religious authority ultimately underscores a profound human truth. Insight, especially insight into hidden forces, is always contested. Those who pursue understanding beyond accepted norms risk conflict, persecution, and isolation, but they also carry the potential to transform culture, science, and spirituality. The history of the occult and religious conflict demonstrates that knowledge itself is a form of power, capable of challenging authority while shaping destiny. Suppression may delay discovery, but it cannot extinguish curiosity, insight, or the drive to perceive what is hidden. Through centuries of tension, persecution, and negotiation, the occult survived within Europe's religious landscape, adapting to survive. Its persistence reminds us that forbidden knowledge is not inherently opposed to faith, morality, or devotion. It is opposed only to rigid orthodoxy that fears insight, change, and the illumination of the unknown. The dynamic between hidden knowledge and religious authority is a mirror of the broader human struggle to balance curiosity, fear, responsibility, and ethics. In this struggle, insight becomes both a gift and a burden, a source of enlightenment and a cause of danger, guiding humanity through the complex interplay of perception, power, and belief. Ultimately, the history of the occult and religious conflict illustrates a timeless lesson. Knowledge that challenges authority will always provoke fear, but it will also inspire resilience, creativity, and adaptation. Those who pursue hidden truths must navigate danger, secrecy, and moral responsibility, yet their efforts ensure that wisdom survives even in the darkest periods of human history. In the shadow of fear and dogma, the seeds of insight endure, preserved in texts, symbols, and the minds of those courageous enough to seek understanding, demonstrating that the pursuit of hidden knowledge is an indelible part of the human journey. Across the centuries, hidden knowledge has seldom been confined to individuals. It thrives within networks, carefully maintained by those who understand both the value and the danger of what they hold. Secret societies, Rosicrucians, early Freemasons, Hermetic lodges, and esoteric fraternities functioned as custodians of forbidden wisdom, preserving it through ritual, allegory, and coded transmission. These societies were more than clubs or intellectual circles. They were intricate networks designed to protect knowledge from persecution, misuse, and the uninitiated, while simultaneously cultivating the skills, insight, and discipline required to wield it responsibly. Within their walls, philosophy, alchemy, astrology, and mysticism converged, forming a living lineage of wisdom that connected past and present, east and west, spiritual and material. Membership in such societies was never accidental. Initiates underwent rigorous preparation, testing, and instruction before being entrusted with even fragments of hidden knowledge. Each stage of initiation was both literal and symbolic, reflecting a journey of perception, discipline, and ethical responsibility. Rituals, allegories, and symbols were not merely decorative. They were vehicles for understanding, designed to encode complex truths that could survive persecution, censorship, and the passage of time. In this way, secret societies ensured that knowledge could endure, evolve, and transmit to those capable of appreciating and safeguarding it. The secrecy was not arbitrary, it was essential for survival. The function of these networks extended far beyond the internal cultivation of wisdom. They served as conduits for communication, connecting thinkers, explorers, and practitioners across geographic and cultural boundaries. Letters, manuscripts, and encoded texts circulated discreetly, enabling Hermetic principles, alchemical discoveries, and mystical teachings to flow from one region to another without attracting scrutiny from authorities who might suppress them. Knowledge was thus decentralized yet connected, shared selectively but systematically, ensuring that insights preserved in one corner of Europe might emerge centuries later to influence science, art, and philosophy in another. These networks were the bloodstream of hidden wisdom, circulating insight where it was most needed while protecting it from those who would destroy it. The influence of secret societies often extended into political and social realms. Leaders, monarchs, and scholars sometimes relied on advice and insight derived from occult teachings preserved in these networks. This influence was subtle, almost invisible, yet profound. Decisions on diplomacy, military strategy, and exploration could be informed by knowledge of celestial patterns, Hermetic correspondences, or alchemical principles. The societies themselves were careful not to overstep. Their aim was never overt control but guidance, mentorship, and the careful stewardship of knowledge in a world that often feared and persecuted those who possessed it. They operated in shadows, shaping history without revealing themselves to the broader world. Secrecy was both shield and method. Codes, symbols, and allegories allowed members to convey complex truths while obscuring meaning from outsiders. Books and manuscripts often contained multiple layers of meaning. Allegorical narratives, symbolic diagrams, and cryptic instructions that could be deciphered only by those who had undergone initiation. A painting, a diagram, or a poem could be a vessel of profound insight, readable only to the trained eye. This system of concealment was not merely defensive. It cultivated intelligence, perception, and patience in initiates, ensuring that the knowledge would be understood, respected, and applied wisely. The very act of decoding became a part of the learning process, teaching discernment, focus, and ethical responsibility. The cultural impact of these networks is remarkable. Artists, architects, musicians, and writers often moved within these circles, incorporating esoteric symbolism into their work. Hermetic and alchemical motifs appear in Renaissance paintings, Gothic cathedrals, and literary compositions, layered with meanings visible only to those who understood the underlying principles. Through these subtle integrations, secret societies preserved and propagated knowledge, creating a continuum of insight that transcended generations and geographic boundaries. Even as public institutions condemned certain practices, the private networks of the initiated ensured that forbidden wisdom endured. These societies were also laboratories of ethical training. The pursuit of hidden knowledge is inherently risky. It offers power and insight, but also the potential for corruption, misuse, and personal peril. Secret societies emphasized moral discipline, self-awareness, and responsibility as prerequisites for the application of knowledge. Initiates were taught that insight without wisdom could be catastrophic, that the failure to respect the balance between the visible and invisible, the known and the hidden, could bring disaster. In this way, these networks functioned not only as preservers of knowledge but as ethical guardians, instilling in their members a sense of duty that extended beyond personal gain or curiosity. The networks also allowed for resilience in times of persecution. During the witch hunts, the Inquisition, and other periods of suppression, knowledge stored in secret societies survived precisely because it was concealed, coded, and transmitted cautiously. Manuscripts were hidden, rituals adapted, and teachings encoded within symbolism, ensuring continuity despite societal upheaval. These societies became living archives of wisdom, capable of outlasting empires, religious edicts, and political change. The continuity of hidden knowledge through centuries is as much a story of strategic preservation as it is of intellectual and spiritual insight. The legacy of these networks continues to resonate. Modern interpretations of Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, and other esoteric societies often highlight symbolic, philosophical, and ethical teachings rather than practical occult methods. Yet the historical impact of these societies is undeniable. They preserved, transmitted, and applied knowledge that might otherwise have been lost to censorship, persecution, or time. Their careful stewardship ensured that Hermetic principles, alchemical insights, and mystical philosophies survived to influence science, art, and thought in ways often unrecognized by mainstream history. The hidden networks of the past laid the foundation for the integration of forbidden knowledge into the broader currents of human progress. Ultimately, the story of secret societies reminds us that knowledge is rarely neutral and never fully public. Its preservation requires discretion, trust, and a system of ethical responsibility. These societies demonstrate that insight, especially forbidden insight, is a form of currency, one that must be protected, cultivated, and transmitted carefully. Through their networks, knowledge flows across time, connecting generations of seekers, scholars, and initiates, ensuring that wisdom endures even when threatened by fear, ignorance, or persecution. The invisible web of hidden knowledge, maintained through secrecy, ritual, and community, is one of the most enduring and remarkable legacies of human civilization, a testament to the resilience, ingenuity, and courage of those who have dedicated themselves to understanding the unseen forces that shape our world. Across history, certain individuals have emerged as extraordinary custodians of hidden knowledge, masters whose understanding transcended ordinary learning and whose lives were devoted to the pursuit and protection of wisdom. These were not merely scholars or experimenters. They were visionaries, initiates who navigated the complex intersection of the visible and invisible worlds. Their teachings, often transmitted in secrecy, allegory, or coded manuscripts, have left a legacy that continues to intrigue, inspire, and confound centuries later. The masters were guides, philosophers, and strategists, whose insights shaped art, science, politics, and spirituality in ways both subtle and profound. One defining characteristic of these masters was their dedication to integration. They sought to unify knowledge across disciplines, blending alchemy, astrology, Hermetic philosophy, and mystical practice into coherent frameworks. Unlike casual practitioners who might focus on a single domain, these masters understood the interconnections between matter, spirit, and consciousness. Every experiment in the laboratory, every observation of celestial patterns, every meditation on sacred geometry was part of a larger inquiry into the hidden order of the universe. Their wisdom was not isolated. It was systemic, a map of relationships between the physical and metaphysical, the human and the cosmic. Many masters lived in extreme secrecy, aware that the knowledge they carried could provoke fear, persecution, or exploitation. Their manuscripts were encoded with symbols, allegories, and diagrams intelligible only to those trained in interpretation. Teaching was selective, often conducted privately, with mentorship emphasizing both understanding and ethical responsibility. Initiates were carefully chosen, tested for discernment, patience, and moral integrity. This selective approach ensured that knowledge was preserved for those capable of wielding it wisely and safeguarded against misuse. The masters knew that insight without responsibility could be destructive, and they devoted their lives to cultivating both intelligence and character in their students. Alchemy, for many of these masters, was more than a pursuit of material transformation. It was a metaphor and a method for spiritual refinement. The laboratory was a sacred space where observation, experimentation, and intuition converged. Metals were transformed, substances purified, and reactions studied not merely for their physical outcomes but for the deeper principles they revealed. The processes mirrored internal states of development, teaching patience, focus, and insight. In this way, every experiment became a lesson in perception, a practice in aligning the human mind with universal patterns. To follow a master was to learn not only techniques but also the discipline of understanding the hidden forces at work in the world. Astrology and Hermetic philosophy were central to their teachings. Masters often emphasized the principle of correspondence, that the movements of the heavens reflected patterns on earth, and that understanding one could illuminate the other. This approach was neither superstition nor deterministic. It was a disciplined observation of hidden order. By studying celestial cycles, human behavior, and natural phenomena, the masters developed predictive insights and frameworks for decision-making that could guide rulers, strategists, and seekers alike. Their understanding of cause and effect extended beyond the immediately visible, allowing them to perceive connections that eluded ordinary observation. The influence of these masters extended far beyond their immediate students. Even when their teachings were hidden, encoded, or partially lost, their principles seeped into broader currents of human culture. Artists, scientists, explorers, and philosophers who never directly studied with a master often carried echoes of their wisdom in the work they produced. The methods of observation, experimentation, and symbolic thinking taught by these masters informed Renaissance art, early modern science, and even political strategy. Knowledge, once hidden, had a way of resurfacing, shaping history subtly but indelibly, through the minds of those capable of perceiving its depth. Many masters were also adept at navigating the dangers of their time. In eras of persecution, their survival depended on discretion, disguise, and careful transmission of knowledge. Some lived double lives, public figures in courts, universities, or religious institutions, while privately guiding initiates and preserving hermetic, alchemical, and mystical teachings. Their ability to operate in secrecy was a skill as critical as their intellectual mastery. They understood that knowledge, like fire, could illuminate or destroy, and their strategic concealment ensured that wisdom endured across generations, even when exposed to the threat of suppression or misunderstanding. Teaching methods employed by these masters were often as subtle as the knowledge itself. Lessons were embedded in allegory, ritual, and practical demonstration. A single experiment, a drawing, or a narrative could convey multiple layers of meaning, offering insight at the level the student was ready to comprehend. The process of discovery was iterative and personalized, requiring careful attention, reflection, and ethical discernment. In this way, the masters cultivated not only knowledge but wisdom, ensuring that the pursuit of understanding remained aligned with responsibility, moral judgment, and the capacity to perceive hidden consequences. The masters were also keenly aware of the human dimension of knowledge. They understood that insight could provoke fear, envy, or ambition, and they tailored their guidance accordingly. Knowledge was always relational. It required trust, patience, and mutual respect. Their influence extended beyond the intellectual. It shaped character, perception, and the ability to navigate complex social, spiritual, and political realities. A master's true legacy was measured not in the accumulation of facts or symbols, but in the transformation of those who were prepared to receive them, in the cultivation of discernment, courage, and understanding that could outlast persecution, time, and obscurity. Even the lives of the masters themselves were often shrouded in mystery. Some vanished, leaving only cryptic manuscripts or legendary accounts of their work. Others became mythologized, their stories blending fact and allegory, obscuring the line between history and legend. This mystique was part of their power. It protected knowledge from misuse, preserved the aura of insight, and inspired future generations of seekers. The very enigma surrounding the masters ensured that their teachings continued to captivate, challenge, and inspire those willing to engage deeply with the hidden dimensions of reality. Ultimately, the masters and their hidden teachings illuminate a central truth about human curiosity. Knowledge is inseparable from responsibility, insight from discipline, and understanding from ethical awareness. Their legacy demonstrates that forbidden knowledge is never simply dangerous or frivolous. It carries the potential to transform individuals, societies, and the course of history when handled wisely. The lives of the masters, their methods, and their teachings form a lineage of wisdom that threads through centuries, connecting past, present, and future in an enduring pursuit of truth hidden beneath the visible surface of reality. The story of these masters reminds us that wisdom is cultivated, protected, and transmitted with intention. It is not given freely, nor is it safe in the hands of the unprepared. Yet when approached with humility, discernment, and courage, hidden knowledge has the power to illuminate the unseen, guide human action, and shape destiny. The master's legacy is a testament to the enduring human quest to perceive, understand, and navigate the hidden patterns of existence, a pursuit that continues to inspire seekers across the centuries and across the world. Even as the world entered the modern era, the pursuit of hidden knowledge did not vanish. It simply evolved. The principles once guarded by alchemists, Hermetic scholars, and secret societies found new expression in the language of science and technology. The quest to understand nature, manipulate matter, and uncover the underlying structures of reality carried forward the legacy of forbidden knowledge, translating esoteric wisdom into empirical methodology. Laboratories replaced candlelit chambers, equations replaced cryptic symbols, and experimentation became both precise and replicable. Yet beneath the surface of rational science, the echoes of the occult persisted, shaping inquiry, methodology, and the ambition to harness forces previously considered mystical. The 19th and early 20th centuries marked a dramatic acceleration in this transformation. Chemists, physicists, and engineers were building upon centuries of alchemical experimentation, often without explicit acknowledgement of its mystical origins. The study of electricity, magnetism, and energy fields carried the same curiosity for unseen forces that had guided Hermetic practitioners. Marie Curie's work with radioactivity, Nikola Tesla's experiments with electrical currents and resonance, and the exploration of atomic structure were all, in essence, attempts to perceive, measure, and manipulate hidden dimensions of reality. In these endeavors, the line between science and what might have once been considered magic became a faint, almost imperceptible blur. Modern science also borrowed the language and structure of secrecy from occult traditions. Certain discoveries were shared only among select circles of researchers, guarded by patents, peer review, and professional networks. Classified research during the 20th century, including early nuclear physics, radar technology, and aerospace development, followed patterns similar to those of secret societies. Knowledge was powerful, dangerous if misused, and required careful stewardship. Just as Hermetic initiates were taught responsibility alongside insight, modern scientists recognized that their breakthroughs could alter the course of history, for good or ill. Knowledge in both eras carried weight, risk, and moral consequence. Quantum mechanics and relativity, in particular, reveal the enduring resonance of occult thought in modern science. The exploration of particles that defy classical observation, of entangled states, and of forces that operate beyond visible perception echoes the Hermetic principle that the microcosm reflects the macrocosm. While framed in the language of mathematics and experimental validation, these discoveries continue the centuries-old human fascination with hidden structures, unseen forces, and the potential to comprehend and influence what is ordinarily imperceptible. In a sense, the laboratories of the modern physicist are spiritual successors to the alchemical chambers and Hermetic workshops of the past, grounded in observation yet inspired by curiosity about the invisible. Cybernetics, artificial intelligence, and the manipulation of information in the digital age can also be seen as contemporary manifestations of the quest for hidden knowledge. Algorithms, code, and data operate like encoded Hermetic texts. Their power lies not only in visible output, but in the structures and correspondences underlying them. Those who understand these hidden layers can influence, predict, and shape outcomes with precision, much like initiates who decoded alchemical or astrological principles to guide action. Modern technology, in this sense, represents a continuation of the ancient pursuit. The desire to perceive the unseen, understand patterns, and wield knowledge that remains inaccessible to the uninitiated. Even in medicine and biology, the influence of hidden knowledge is clear. Genetic research, neurobiology, and the mapping of human physiology explore systems previously invisible to human observation. The alchemist's laboratory, once devoted to purifying metals or creating elixirs, finds its echo in gene editing, stem cell research, and molecular engineering. The Hermetic idea that the macrocosm and microcosm are connected manifests in the intricate understanding of cellular processes and the ability to manipulate life at its most fundamental levels. Knowledge that was once feared as forbidden is now codified, standardized, and applied with profound consequences, demonstrating continuity between mystical inquiry and modern empirical science. However, the persistence of secrecy reminds us that the pursuit of knowledge has always carried ethical and existential weight. Classified projects, proprietary technologies, and advanced research in AI or energy reflect the ongoing need to balance insight with responsibility. The hidden dimensions of knowledge are not inherently dangerous. Danger arises when understanding is pursued without discipline, ethical oversight, or awareness of consequences. This lesson, familiar to alchemists and Hermetic scholars, continues to shape modern scientific culture. The deeper one probes, the greater the responsibility, and the more profound the potential for both creation and destruction. The occult in modern science also manifests in the imagination, philosophy, and speculative thought that surrounds discovery. Visionaries like Tesla and later theoretical physicists often spoke of energy, resonance, and fields in terms that echoed the poetic and symbolic language of Hermeticism. Science, while formalized and empirical, retains a capacity for awe, wonder, and speculative insight, the same qualities that motivated seekers of forbidden knowledge centuries ago. The pursuit of hidden knowledge, whether in mystical texts or quantum laboratories, is in essence a pursuit of understanding beyond the immediate, the visible, and the conventional. Ultimately, the story of the occult in modern science and technology underscores a timeless truth. Knowledge is transformative, perilous, and persistent. Forbidden wisdom, once transmitted through secret societies and encoded manuscripts, has evolved into rigorous inquiry, experimentation, and innovation. Yet its essence remains unchanged. The desire to see what is hidden, to understand what is imperceptible, and to act upon insight with discipline and responsibility. Modern science is the heir to an ancient lineage of curiosity, observation, and courage, demonstrating that the pursuit of hidden knowledge is not confined to the past, but is an ongoing journey shaping our world, our perception, and the future itself. The fusion of the mystical past with the scientific present reminds us that curiosity cannot be suppressed indefinitely. Knowledge that was once feared as dangerous, forbidden, or heretical persists in new forms, continuing to illuminate reality and expand the horizons of human possibility. In laboratories, in algorithms, in explorations of matter and energy, the legacy of the masters endures. They have left a mark not only on philosophy and spirituality, but on the very fabric of contemporary science and technology, proving that the pursuit of hidden knowledge is eternal, adaptive, and fundamentally human. Throughout history, knowledge has always been power, and hidden knowledge even more so. The occult, with its hermetic principles, alchemical insights, and secret symbolism, often played a subtle yet decisive role in the corridors of political authority. Rulers, advisors, and revolutionaries who could access or interpret this knowledge gained advantages invisible to the ordinary observer. The ability to foresee patterns, understand influence, and manipulate circumstances was a form of power that transcended armies, wealth, or diplomacy. Political authority and the pursuit of the hidden were intertwined, a delicate balance of perception, strategy, and secrecy that shaped the destinies of nations. Monarchs and sovereigns frequently relied on astrologers, alchemists, and hermetic advisors to guide decisions of state. The alignment of planets was interpreted not as superstition but as a predictive framework for timing wars, coronations, and treaties. Knowledge of alchemical processes, botanical compounds, and celestial correspondences informed diplomatic gifts, medical treatments, and even espionage. Courts became centers of subtle experimentation, where insight into hidden forces could confer prestige, influence, and survival. For those with access, this knowledge offered an almost supernatural edge, a way to navigate the uncertainties of human behavior, international relations, and the precarious life of rulers. The occult also influenced the strategies of revolutionaries and insurgents. Secret societies, initiates, and underground networks often used esoteric teachings to coordinate action, protect members, and interpret signs in the world around them. Symbolism, coded messages, and hidden correspondences were not merely ornamental. They were practical tools of survival and organization. In revolutionary contexts, occult knowledge could guide timing, mobilization, and even psychological influence over opponents. Just as rulers used astrology and hermetic insight to maintain control, those challenging authority could exploit similar principles to gain advantage, creating a dynamic interplay between power and hidden knowledge that was as subtle as it was decisive. Rituals, ceremonies, and public symbolism also served as instruments of influence. Monarchs and political leaders who incorporated esoteric motifs into architecture, coins, and official ceremonies were not merely indulging in aesthetics. They were signaling access to hidden wisdom and projecting authority beyond the visible. The display of understanding, whether in the proportions of a palace, the alignment of a ceremonial site, or the symbolism embedded in regalia, conveyed power on a level that transcended brute force. Knowledge itself became a currency, signaling intelligence, divine favor, and strategic awareness to both allies and adversaries. The connection between the occult and political power is perhaps most evident in the manipulation of perception. Leaders who understood human psychology, symbolism, and hidden patterns could shape narratives, influence behavior, and consolidate authority. This was true not only of monarchs and emperors but of advisors, priests, and secretive councils. The ability to read the invisible currents of social, cultural, and spiritual life was a form of intelligence that augmented armies, taxes, and treaties. Hidden knowledge, when applied with discretion and insight, could determine the success or failure of political ambitions, and those who mastered it were often remembered as strategic geniuses or enigmatic figures whose influence extended far beyond their visible acts. Espionage, diplomacy, and strategy were deeply entwined with occult principles. Secret codes, symbolic communication, and hermetic frameworks guided negotiations and intelligence gathering. Alchemical and astrological insights informed not only military tactics but also the timing of political initiatives. Leaders who could interpret these hidden signs often anticipated the moves of rivals or prepared contingencies that others could not foresee. In this way, the occult was not merely a philosophical pursuit. It was a practical tool, a strategic advantage that shaped the trajectories of empires, city-states, and nations. The danger of misusing or misinterpreting hidden knowledge was ever present. Just as insight could confer power, error could provoke disaster. A miscalculation in reading celestial alignments, misinterpretation of symbolic communication, or overconfidence in secret networks could lead to defeat, exposure, or collapse. The stakes of occult-guided politics were high, requiring not only understanding but ethical and strategic judgment. Knowledge was power, but only when tempered by wisdom, discipline, and careful consideration of consequences. The masters, advisors, and initiates who wielded this knowledge understood that every action carried both visible and invisible repercussions. Historical episodes reveal the delicate interplay between secrecy, influence, and survival. The courts of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East were filled with figures who consulted astrologers, alchemists, and mystical scholars in matters of governance. Decisions that appear purely political on the surface often had layers of hidden strategy informed by esoteric insight. From alliances and treaties to military campaigns and succession planning, the invisible hand of occult knowledge shaped events in ways that remain partially obscured by time. Political acumen, therefore, was inseparable from the understanding of hidden patterns, a lesson acknowledged and exploited by those who understood the unseen forces at play. Even modern politics has echoes of this dynamic. The use of intelligence networks, classified information, and symbolic signaling draws on the same principles that guided earlier practitioners of hidden knowledge. Understanding human perception, leveraging unseen influence, and controlling the flow of information are contemporary expressions of a long-standing human effort to harness hidden forces. The tools may have changed, from alchemical manuscripts to encrypted communication and strategic data analysis, but the underlying principle remains. Those who can access, interpret, and act upon hidden knowledge wield a unique form of power, shaping outcomes beyond the perception of the ordinary observer. Ultimately, the occult in political power demonstrates that knowledge is inseparable from responsibility and consequence. The ability to perceive what others cannot, to interpret hidden patterns, and to act decisively is a form of authority that extends far beyond material resources. Throughout history, rulers, revolutionaries, and advisors who understood these dynamics could navigate uncertainty, manipulate circumstance, and secure their legacies. Their successes and failures illuminate a central truth. Knowledge, especially forbidden or hidden knowledge, is not neutral. It shapes destiny, influences societies, and carries ethical weight, requiring wisdom, discipline, and courage to wield effectively. The story of the occult and political power is, therefore, a story of subtle influence, strategic insight, and the enduring human fascination with the unseen. It reminds us that what is visible is only part of the equation. The hidden currents of knowledge, perception, and understanding often determine the outcomes of history. To understand politics fully, one must consider not only armies, laws, and treaties, but the invisible forces, the symbolic patterns, and the secret wisdom that guide decisions, shape behavior, and influence the arc of civilizations. The pursuit, preservation, and application of hidden knowledge has always been a pathway to power, a principle that continues to resonate even in our modern world, where secrets, strategy, and insight remain essential to leadership and influence. The influence of forbidden knowledge extends far beyond laboratories, palaces, or secret societies. It pulses through the veins of modern culture, shaping our stories, our art, and even our collective imagination. In literature, film, music, and digital media, the occult and esoteric wisdom appear both explicitly and subtly, often guiding narrative structures, symbolic themes, and the way audiences perceive the hidden forces at work in the world. What was once carefully guarded in manuscripts and rituals now finds expression in pop culture. Yet the essence remains the same: a fascination with the unseen, the mysterious, and the transformative power of knowledge that is denied to the uninitiated. From Gothic novels to modern thrillers, authors have long drawn on the archetypes and symbols cultivated by centuries of hidden knowledge. Hermetic principles, alchemical motifs, and mystical correspondences appear in subtle ways, encoding narratives with layers of meaning that reward close attention. Characters who pursue forbidden wisdom, scholars, magicians, detectives, and rebels, often mirror the historical masters. They navigate secrecy, danger, and ethical dilemmas, and their journeys reflect the human fascination with insight, power, and transformation. The occult becomes a lens through which the struggles of knowledge, morality, and destiny are dramatized, giving modern audiences access to themes that have captivated humanity for centuries. Film, with its capacity to visualize mystery and atmosphere, amplifies the influence of forbidden knowledge. Directors and screenwriters often embed esoteric symbols in imagery, set design, and narrative structure, creating a cinematic language that communicates hidden truths on multiple levels. Gothic architecture, cryptic manuscripts, and ritualistic sequences on screen echo the rituals and laboratories of the past, providing audiences with a visceral sense of secrecy and revelation. Even when presented as fiction, these motifs carry the weight of centuries of esoteric tradition, evoking awe, curiosity, and a sense of the sublime. In this way, modern media becomes a bridge, connecting the historical pursuit of hidden knowledge to contemporary forms of perception and imagination. Video games, graphic novels, and interactive media continue this trend, creating immersive experiences in which players encounter symbols, puzzles, and hidden correspondences that mirror the methods of historical initiates. Players are invited to decode clues, understand hidden systems, and navigate complex environments, a gamified echo of the alchemist's laboratory or the initiate's ritual chamber. Through engagement with these systems, audiences participate actively in the process of discovery, learning subtle lessons about observation, inference, and the consequences of knowledge. The underlying appeal remains timeless: the desire to see what others cannot, to understand hidden patterns, and to act with insight and discretion. Music, too, carries the legacy of forbidden knowledge, though often in more abstract ways. Composers have long used numerology, harmonic ratios, and symbolic structures to convey hidden meanings, a practice tracing back to the Renaissance and Baroque eras. Modern artists sometimes employ similar techniques, embedding symbolic structures or subliminal motifs that evoke the esoteric principles once guarded in manuscripts and rituals. Even when these methods are not consciously recognized by listeners, they influence perception, mood, and interpretation, demonstrating that hidden knowledge can shape experience on multiple sensory levels, from visual art to auditory engagement. The digital age has transformed the accessibility and dissemination of forbidden knowledge, while paradoxically requiring renewed secrecy. Online forums, encrypted documents, and digital archives allow previously inaccessible manuscripts and interpretations to circulate widely, yet the challenge of discernment remains. Just as historical initiates required mentorship and initiation to navigate coded texts, modern seekers must develop skills of critical thinking, context, and ethical understanding to engage meaningfully with the vast streams of information now available. Knowledge is abundant, but insight remains scarce, echoing the centuries-old principle that wisdom must be cultivated, not merely collected. Hollywood and mainstream media often romanticize the occult, portraying it as entertainment, spectacle, or metaphor. Yet even in these dramatizations, the resonance of historical practices remains. Audiences are drawn to narratives in which forbidden knowledge confers power, illuminates truth, or demands moral reckoning. The appeal lies not only in fear or fascination, but in the subtle recognition that human experience is shaped by hidden forces, patterns, and choices that are not immediately visible. In this sense, contemporary culture is a reflection of the age-old tension between curiosity, insight, and responsibility, dramatized for engagement, reflection, and emotional impact. Education and scholarship have also begun to explore these intersections, examining the historical influence of the occult on science, art, and society. Courses on Hermetic philosophy, alchemy, and esoteric symbolism reveal the deep currents that have shaped Western and global intellectual history, showing how forbidden knowledge has influenced creativity, discovery, and governance. This scholarly engagement allows modern audiences to contextualize the allure of secrecy, seeing it not merely as superstition or fantasy, but as a profound human pursuit with real historical consequences. Forbidden knowledge is no longer confined to legend. It is studied, analyzed, and integrated into our understanding of human culture. The persistence of occult themes in media, education, and creative expression demonstrates a fundamental truth. Human beings are drawn to what is hidden, mysterious, and transformative. Forbidden knowledge speaks to a universal desire to understand the unseen, to uncover patterns beyond ordinary perception, and to engage with forces that shape both internal and external realities. This fascination is timeless, bridging ancient manuscripts, secret societies, and modern digital storytelling, showing that the impulse to seek, decode, and integrate hidden wisdom remains a central part of human experience. Ultimately, the presence of forbidden knowledge in modern culture and media is more than entertainment. It is an invitation to engage with the mysteries that have shaped human history, thought, and imagination. By interacting with these symbols, narratives, and hidden correspondences, audiences participate in a lineage of inquiry that stretches from the alchemists, Hermetic philosophers, and secret societies of the past to the creators and thinkers of today. Modern culture, in its fascination with the occult, is both a reflection of and continuation of the eternal human quest to understand, interpret, and navigate the unseen currents that shape our world. The study of forbidden knowledge in media also encourages reflection on our own relationship with insight and secrecy. Every story, symbol, or hidden layer challenges audiences to question what is visible, what is concealed, and what it means to seek understanding responsibly. In doing so, the legacy of the occult transcends time, demonstrating that the pursuit of hidden knowledge is not a relic of the past but a living, dynamic force shaping thought, creativity, and perception in the modern era. The encounter with forbidden knowledge is never neutral. It alters perception, reshaping the boundaries between what is known and what is possible. To glimpse what lies beyond conventional understanding can awaken awe, curiosity, and empowerment, but it can also provoke fear and disorientation. Those who confront hidden truths often find themselves suspended between wonder and doubt, their worldview expanded yet destabilized. The mind struggles to reconcile the visible with the unseen, the logical with the mystical. Some emerge enlightened, carrying new insights that deepen their sense of purpose. Others retreat, overwhelmed by the weight of revelation. Throughout history, the pursuit of the hidden has mirrored the internal journey of consciousness itself, a movement from ignorance to illumination, from comfort to transformation. In this way, forbidden knowledge becomes not only an external discovery but an inward trial, testing the limits of belief, courage, and understanding. In the end, forbidden knowledge is neither light nor darkness. It is a mirror. What we see within it depends on who we are when we seek it. From the temples of Egypt to the data streams of the digital age, the same fire burns. The human desire to know what lies beyond the veil. The masters tried to protect it, to guard it from misuse, yet knowledge always finds a way. Perhaps the true secret is not what is hidden, but what awakens within us when we finally dare to look.